In compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, the East Amwell Township Committee has rescheduled its closed executive session time previously advertised in the January 10th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat. Closed executive sessions will now take place at 7 p.m. on the same dates as the regular meetings listed in the annual public notice and will be held at the Municipal Building at 1070 Route 202, Ringoes, New Jersey.
Hey, Chris. Let's go.
At this time, we're going to close for executive session. Do you need a motion?
Yes.
I move we enter executive session.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
In compliance with the Open Public Meeting Act, this is a regular scheduled meeting pursuant to the resolution adopted on January 2nd, 2019, with a meeting notice published in the Hunterdon County Democrat issue of January 10th, 2019. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Hunterdon County Democrat, Times of Trenton, Star Ledger, Courier News, posted on the bulletin board, and filed in the clerk's office on June 7th, 2019.
Please rise for the pledge of allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For agenda review, under CFO resolutions, we're going to add number 3, resolution for cancellation of driveway bond. Number 4 would be resolution for Chapter 159 Clean Communities Grant. Item C under new business will be moved to number 1 under update from the CFO. Item D under new business will be moved to C under CFO introduction of ordinances.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. We have a lot to get done this evening. I'm going to try to get through some of the more mundane procedural stuff as quickly as we can, because I suspect that most of you are here for the public hearing this evening, so we will try to get to that as quickly as we can. I have a few announcements. First, the East Amwell Museum will be showing Reflections, Czechia and Poland, an exhibit by Kaya Hendricks, until June 18th. I attended the grand opening on that last Sunday. We refer to it as the Holocaust exhibit. It is a exhibit of photos of concentration camps and other things relevant to the Holocaust. It's a very, very good exhibit, very moving, and I highly encourage all of you to attend. It's really, really a great exhibit done by one of our young residents. The Flemington Jewish Community Center will be holding their farmland bike ride on Sunday, June 23rd, and the routes are posted on our website. Anytime we get word that there's going to be any sort of bike race or bike rally that's passing through East Amwell, we post it on the website and try to get a map from the sponsor so that we can let the residents know when and where the bikes will be riding. The municipal offices are closed on July 4th. I think the next one is irrelevant. That's done already. Yeah. E, the summer playground is scheduled at East Amwell Township School from July 1st to the 26th, from 9 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. Registration is $75 until June 15th and $80 after June 15th. The East Amwell Parks and Recreation Committee Friday Night in the Park will be held on July 12th from 5 p.m. until dark. We had 2 of those last year. They were very well attended. They were a lot of fun, and the weather was remarkably cooperative. Hopefully we'll have the same this year. I highly encourage people to attend. It's a great way to get out and meet your neighbors. Volunteers are needed on June 19th for the rain gardens at Clawson Park. As part of an effort to improve the rain gardens at Clawson Park and their water quality improvement features, volunteers are requested to come to Clawson Park on Wednesday, June 19th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. to assist with the removal of invasive plants from the rain gardens and planting native plants in their place. If you're interested in volunteering for all or any portion of this time, please contact Dr. Jack. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name. but it is in the agenda and his email address and phone number as well. Hello, Pete. And I will now turn things over to Margaret, our CFO, for the update from our CFO.
Okay. First thing I wanted to hand out, since we finally have a budget in place, is just an update on where we are with that. So I'll pass that out. My only area of concern is the one line that's highlighted. We had a couple instances where things happened that we weren't expecting, so we're gonna have to be very creative for the rest of the year to get through this. Because that is the line item where we take office supplies and postage out of. And as you can see, there is nothing left in there. All right, Krista moved something underneath my update, the capital expenditure for new mowing tractor and street sweeping brush.
Yeah, I can talk about that, Margaret. Jason Silverthorne, our DPW supervisor, reached out to me last week. He'd like to purchase 2 pieces of equipment for our DPW. One, which is a suggestion I made to him, it's a hydraulic power angle broom. Basically, what it is it's a big hairbrush that you use to sweep the roads clean. And the reason I thought we needed that is we're doing a lot of road work. Our roads are in terrible shape. A significant amount of the road work is structural, which requires excavation. It results in mud being left on the roads. And what was happening is the DPW guys would try to sweep that off after they were done, but that takes a significant amount of time, and it's very difficult to do a good job manually. They actually make this large brush that we can attach to a piece of our existing equipment that will get the road nice and clean within a few minutes. So while the upfront cost is $14,000, I figured it will over time wind up saving us money because the DPW will have to spend significantly less time cleaning up after construction projects on the roads, and 2, it'll do a much better job. You won't be driving through these big mud balls after they do work on your road. So that was the first item. The second item Jason requested is a tractor with a sidearm mower. As you know, our DPW goes around East Amwell with a tractor that has a mower hanging off an arm, and they mow down the weeds and the grass alongside the road. There's obviously an aesthetic benefit to that, but there's also, and probably more importantly, a significant safety benefit. If you don't trim down those weeds, you have sight triangle issues. When you pull up to an intersection, you can't see because the weeds are so high. The existing tractor that we are using is 31 years old. So it is near the end of its useful life. It is an open tractor. It does not have a cab. As a result, there are limitations. You can't really use it in bad weather. And it's just very difficult working in an open tractor. It's much easier if you have a tractor with a cab. I know because I have an open tractor that I use on my farm, and when you're out there for a while, with all that crap flying at you, it's not the most pleasant. So Jason would like to acquire a new mower, new tractor with a side-on mower. It will enable him to get done a lot more work in a lot faster time. You guys could come in, sit down.
Question.
We're not really open to the public
I
yet.
was just going to ask you if you're going to buy that stuff that you mentioned. You're going to purchase it?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
that would be the goal. Is we have money in the budget. The goal would be to purchase it.
Thank you.
So,
Now you're going to buy it anyway.
so that's the item on the agenda. Now, Jason tells me that there is money in the budget for that in the
I'm
capital.
canceling some old ordinances. One of them has a significant amount of money in it. It's fully funded. It's going to go back into capital surplus. And with the balance that we have in surplus at the time, there's just enough money to purchase both of these items.
You look, over the years, we've neglected our roads, and we've also to some extent, neglected our DPW in terms of getting them the equipment that they need in order to do what they need to do. And while we're a small town, we have a lot of miles of roads. And those roads have to be maintained, both the roads themselves and the areas alongside the roads. And my own view is that if we give the DPW the proper equipment that they could do this efficiently, in the long run, we're going to come out ahead. We've been trying to build up our capital reserve here so that we can make these types of expenditures. We've had a fair amount of success in doing that over the last 2 years, so the goal would be to buy these 2 pieces of equipment.
You want to do that?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to do that?
You have to ask her. She has the money.
You have to wait.
We need to keep this.
Okay.
I mean, it's nice to hear about.
You have to wait to ask questions when we're open to the public.
Yeah, but you're just talking a lot of nonsense in the end. I'm curious, is he gonna buy it or is he gonna buy it?
You
know,
asked
it's a
that
good thing.
question, you asked that question already, you said yes.
Now, this is a new piece of equipment he
And I
mentioned.
seconded it, so.
Yeah, and it's done.
Oh, he didn't say that. Just say it.
The
We're
plan
gonna
is,
purchase
the
this.
plan is to buy both pieces.
Great.
Might have to start smacking the book.
Okay. Let's, so that this doesn't spin out of control, to the extent people want to speak, let's wait until we're open to the public. Go ahead, Margaret.
Okay, the next piece of business will be the ordinance, the adoption of the ordinance to amend the 2019 salary and wage ordinance for the salary range for a communication administrator. We introduced that at the last meeting, we need to adopt this.
Okay.
Need proof.
Proof of publication?
Yeah. Legal notice was published in the Hunterdon County Democrat on May 16th, 2019, and it was posted and available to the public since introduction on May 9th, 2019.
Okay. Can I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved. I'll second.
Okay. Any member of the public have any comments on the salary and wage ordinance?
Move we close?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Could I have a motion to adopt the salary and wage ordinance?
I'll move 1906.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Christie, you do a roll call?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sobieski?
Yes.
And Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
The adoption notice will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat.
The next is ordinance 1907, an ordinance authorizing and ratifying the use of a third-party electronic payroll service. We are already doing this, we monitor it. The auditors just suggested that we pass a resolution memorializing, or ordinance memorializing.
This legal notice was published in the Hunterdon County Democrat on May 16th, 2019, and it was posted and available to the public since introduction on May 9th, 2019.
Could I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any member of the public like to speak about the payroll services ordinance?
Move we close?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Could I have a motion to approve?
I'll move 1907.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Krista?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sobieski?
Yes.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
The adoption notice will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat.
Okay, I think we want to introduce some ordinances?
Yes, we're going to introduce ordinance 1911, an ordinance to provide for the leveling and subgrade reconstruction of various township roads as general improvements for the Township of East Amwell in the County of Hunterdon, New Jersey, appropriating $40,000 from Capital Improvement Fund.
Right, so in English, as I understand it, this is Jason needs money to do certain capital improvements on our roads.
Routine road repairs, yes.
Right. And so we're moving $40,000 into that portion of the budget, so he has the money to do what he needs to do. Can I have a motion to introduce this ordinance?
I'll move to introduce 1911.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
Can we just give a list of what he's going to be looking at with this $40,000? Does he have the specifics? Oh, I would assume he does. I'm just curious.
Some of it I think he does, because
Okay.
it's stabilizing roads that we're going to chip seal.
Okay.
We have the chip seal program that's going to commence later this year, and a number of the roads have to be stabilized. meaning if they have drainage issues, he has to go in and excavate, fix the drainage issues. He may have to remove and replace certain underground concrete pipes and the like. That's what this money's going to, but I can ask him if he has something more specific.
Yeah, I would just think it would be beneficial for everybody to see,
Sure.
where the money's going.
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. Can I have a motion to introduce 1911?
I think we
just
Oh, did we? I'm sorry.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
This ordinance will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat, and the public hearing is set for the next regular Township Committee meeting on July 11th, 2019 at 7:30 PM.
Okay, introduction of ordinance 1912, an ordinance to provide for the leveling, subgrade reconstruction, and surface treatment of various township roads as general improvements for the Township of East Amwell in the amount of $135,000.
Margaret, this is the chip seal.
This is the chip seal program.
Yeah, as we've discussed at prior meetings, we are initiating later this year a chip seal program. We're going to chip seal several roads in the township in an effort to keep those roads from degrading to the point where they can no longer be sealed and preserved but have to be torn up and totally replaced. And that's what this ordinance 19-12 is designed to do, to set aside the money to do that. We have it in the budget, we're just moving it into the right pocket. Could I have a motion to introduce ordinance 1912?
I'll move 1912.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
This ordinance will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat, and the public hearing is set for the next regular Township Committee meeting on July 11th, 2019 at 7:30 PM.
Okay, you have introduction of bond ordinance 1913, providing for improvements to Linville Road, Phase 1, in and by the Township of East Amwell in the County of Hunterdon, appropriating $260,000 therefore, including a grant expected to receive from the New Jersey DOT in the amount of $175,000.
Do you want to discuss this? You want me to discuss it?
Well, this is phase one, or
Yeah.
phase two.
Uh-huh.
Phase two of Linville Road. I mean, it's pretty clear. We're gonna be resurfacing Linville from Mountain through Rocktown, with the exception of the part that was already done. So we've already done phase one, which is a little section between maybe 800 feet south of, or north of Mountain down the hill, and we're just gonna finish that up.
Now, we have a grant that's paying for a good part of this. That's why we're able to do it. We received a grant. So could I have a motion to introduce ordinance 19-13?
I'll move to introduce 1913.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
This ordinance will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat, and the public hearing is set for the next regular Township Committee meeting on July 11th, 2019 at 7:30.
Okay, the next thing I have are resolutions. I have a second amendment to the 2019 salary and wage resolution, changing a DPW worker's hourly wage from $20.91 to $21.50.
We all discussed this in the context of the hiring of that new worker. Could I have a motion to approve the second amendment to the salary and wage resolution?
I'll move the motion.
All second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, next resolution is to cancel 3 old capital ordinances. Ordinances 12, 2006, 9, 2011, and 12, 2018.
Could I have a motion to approve the resolution for the capital ordinance cancellation?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I have a resolution to cancel or to release a driveway performance bond in the amount of $2,500 for 154 Cider Mill Road.
Can I have a motion to approve the resolution for the cancellation of the driveway performance bond?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the last thing is a resolution for a Chapter 159. We received our Clean Communities money, therefore we have to make an amendment to the budget to add it to the revenue and to the expenditure side.
Can I have a resolution, can I have a motion to approve the resolution for the Chapter 159 Clean Communities Grant?
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion?
Just one question. How does this compare to previous years?
We've been within a $5,000 range. I mean, one year it's 18, one year it's 16, one year it's 17, one year it's 15. This year it was 16,000, so.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else, Margaret?
I think that's it.
We good with Margaret? Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing under special discussion?
No.
Perfect. By the way, this is great. Thank you. Standing committee reports. Farmland and Open Space Committee. We have a farm that has received what's called a green light letter from the SADC, the State Agricultural Development Committee, to put the farm into preservation. In order to move forward, we need a resolution approving that. So could I have a motion to introduce that resolution or to approve that resolution?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approval of the minutes. I've reviewed the April 2019 regular minutes, the April 2019 executive minutes, the May 2019 executive minutes. I have not had a chance to review the May 2019 regular minutes, so I would ask that we defer those until our July meeting. Is everybody here, has everybody here reviewed the April minutes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion to approve the April 11th, 2019 regular minutes?
So moved?
I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain. I was traveling.
Ah, right. Could I have a motion to approve the April 11th, 2019 executive minutes?
So moved? Oh,
Any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
And could I have a motion to approve the May 9th, 2019 executive minutes?
so moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We are now going to open to the public. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we limit this open to the public to 10 minutes. That means 10 minutes per person. If you need to go beyond 10 minutes, there'll be an opportunity at the next open to the public at the end of the meeting. We decided that we would limit this to 10 minutes so that we could get on to other business where there are people here waiting for us to deal with that other business. So could I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Just one comment. Rick. This is for topics that are not on today's agenda.
Sorry.
This is for topics that are not on the agenda.
Okay, anyone from the public would like to speak about any topic that's not on today's agenda? Yes, sir, in the back.
Good evening. So I'm the chief of the Amwell Valley Ambulance Corps, and we want to bring to light some problems we're having with our daytime calls. A couple things. We've been a volunteer service since 1957, serving this community, 100% volunteer, and one of the last squads in Hunter County that's actually volunteered. There's one or two other squads that are 100% volunteer. So we're having problems covering our calls during the day because our members work. So we actually have right now Lambertville and Flemington coming in and covering calls for us during the day. So you have coverage. So you're not waiting. The county will give you 10 minutes to answer a call before they send it to the next squad. Since we know we can't get out during the day from 6 to 6, we automatically put another squad on dual alert with us. So if we get out, that's great, but if not, you have coverage. The other squads really aren't 100% into this because it's not their territory. They're doing it because we have a mutual aid agreement, but eventually that's going to run out. So we're trying to find options of increasing our being able to have members during the day. And I originally became an EMT 30 years ago in Lambertville, and I left Lambertville to come to Amwell Valley because they were going all paid, and I wanted to be a volunteer. Well, volunteering is down so much that it's really impossible to run a squad without paying members now. So our problem is we have enough funds to run our squad as a volunteer squad. We do bring in enough donations to pay for ambulance repairs in our building, and our medical director, and our medical supplies. We're not rich by any means. We don't have a lot of money to throw around. We can't go out and buy a new ambulance if we wanted to tomorrow, but we have enough to maintain what we have. So we're looking at almost $150,000 to pay people during the day. We've gotten quotes from other rescue squads, which are some are more. The other quote's not in, but I can't imagine it being any less than that. That's insurances, taxes, overtime, that's just during the day. We do not have enough donations to cover that. The people of Amwell Valley, they have been very good to us. We do get donations, but we just don't have the money for that. So we're looking for township help, maybe a committee, some sort of meeting with us, with the committee. We have looked into merging with other organizations, Lambertville, some fire departments. It's just not feasible right now. Our call volume, to give you an idea, we had 428 calls last year. If you compare it to Lambertville, where they're having 1,500 to 2,000 calls a year, or Flemington, which is having way more calls than that, they're having 5, 6 calls in just a morning. Now today, we had 3 calls. Of course, they were all during the day. So Flemington actually answered all the calls. So last year, I broke it down. We had 428 calls. Our squad answered 280 of them, and we didn't answer 148. And the majority of those calls were all during the day that we didn't answer. There are occasionally times when we don't answer calls at night. We have 5 EMTs, and we have 20 riding members, but most of them are just drivers. So EMTs, trying to find someone to take EMT is really hard. It's a very long class. It's 360 hours or more. So that's a lot of time, and you have to keep it up. So we would love to have EMTs ride during the day, be completely volunteer. It's just not feasible. We have been working on this, and we just realized the problem is bigger than we are, so we need to have help. So I have talked to our liaison, and he said we should come here and ask for help, so we're asking for help. So
what I would suggest is we have a breakout session where maybe 1 or 2 of the members of the township committee could meet with the rescue squad and brainstorm some ideas and see if we can't find a strategic way of navigating through this.
Yeah, because in the long run, if we're not doing the patient care, we're not there for the community. We're not there. It's just why have a rescue squad? And Flemington and Lambertville both charge for their services. So every time they come, you will get, mostly it's for insurance companies, but you are going to get a bill. So we don't bill because, well, we only answer 428 calls. And you can only bill if you actually transport someone to a hospital. It would cost us more money to pay the people to do the billing for us to make it all legal than it would be for us to make money. So it's really a hard time for all squads. So you have my contact information, so as soon as you decide who we should meet with, we should have a meeting. But I want to tell the township people also that we are caring about you. We are trying to, that we just didn't leave you hanging during the day. We wanted to make sure that, there is a squad that's going to come, but also remember some of you live really far out of town.
I think the reality is, number one, that the township and the residents really, appreciate the effort and having the rescue squad and having you guys available to us. And we've been used to doing that gratis. Right? And I think, so to some degree, the residents bear a responsibility in the fact that we've enjoyed this service for free, when in life, nothing's really free. So
Right.
I think we need to get some folks together. And if anyone from the public wants to join in that discussion who has an interest in maybe developing a strategic plan for the rescue squad that could carry this, you're welcome to join me. But I'd be happy to start that conversation with you.
All right, I appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming.
Appreciate your
Appreciate
service.
it. Yeah.
Tim, you can put me down for that session. I'll set it up.
You want to join me?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone else from the public? Richie?
Rich Spiegel, One Mountain Road. You just approved minutes, and when I come in, I asked our clerk, there was no draft minutes. She said she didn't have to put them out there. So my question would be, that's never been since 2005, when I brought action against the planning board for the same thing. And I still think we're a common law state and rule of law prevails. So I like to know under what paragraph she found that draft minutes do not have to be put out before the meeting. And is just somebody made that decision? Did somebody tell her to do that? Did anybody tell you to do that?
No, I learned it in class.
Okay. So that's what it said. So it wasn't a decision of anybody's not to let the public see the draft minutes before they're approved, in case there was anything in there that they see that you missed? Is there any reason why you've done that? No draft minutes.
Richie, we made a decision. The decision is compliant with the law.
It is.
If you have comments on the minutes as they are finalized, as I said to you.
Yeah, I remember you
once in the
saying that,
past,
yeah.
You have the opportunity to come here and present those comments.
Mr. Norman, how are you? I'm glad you're here
Doing
tonight.
fine, thank you.
I don't believe you were on the planning board back in 2005. I know you used to substitute with your dad, I know that. So maybe you can, I'm glad you're sitting there. This is my book from back in 2004, 5, and 6, and 7. So I'm going to read exactly what I said to the planning board back then and brought the action against the planning board, okay? Open Public Meetings, New Jersey State Act 10-4-8A, okay, is one, 10-4-10 is another one. But this one here pertains to the minutes. 10-4-14, minutes shall be promptly available. All right, so I based my complaint on that, because the planning board was doing it for a long time. So that's Open Public Meetings Act. Now, on the the Open Public Meetings Act is 47A, here, 47-1A-5 says, immediate access, immediate, must be prevailed, okay? That's the same thing I said back then. And it became an action against the planning board. It went on for a while. It cost the taxpayers of this town over $3,000. The township attorney against the planning board with her father. He informed, because there was a class action lawsuit going in North Jersey at the time. I still got the letter, and if it's not been destroyed yet by the state in this building, it should still be here. He informed the planning board to provide the minutes immediately. Now, to me, that would be case law. To me, that should prevail over what you've made a decision to do, because our legislators didn't do it. Our legislators say if there's no legislation, you can't create legislation. So if you can show me the legislation that you made this decision, then I'm wrong. And I'm always the one that when I'm wrong, I will say I'm wrong. Okay? But there it is. This is the same thing I said to the planning board back then, the same thing that Mr. Norman said to them and sent the letter to the planning board, which like I say, I have a copy of. So I'll be looking for that paragraph that you said, because I've already talked to Oprah and I've already talked to Community Affairs. Those laws have not changed. They have not changed.
Anyone else from the public like to speak? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My name is Bob Rowe. I live on Toad Lane, Angos, and I would like to, because I am a businessman and I want to try and promote business in the valley. And it seems like the Board of Ringos have been, for the most part, anti-business. There's been a lot of businesses that talk to me and say they have problems trying to get started. The one thing, the gentleman that put all the money into that greenhouse, the old former Mr. Diamond's old house, sits vacant because there was an issue that he can't put an office, as I'm told, can't put an office in that building. And I'm just concerned that if that's so, is that building going to become another eyesore in our community because it's vacant, just as the bank sits vacant? I know, thank goodness, we're looking into starting a business development committee, which I hope to be part of, if they'll allow me, to see what we can do to promote businesses to develop in our community, because businesses will do a great deal for us. I think if they're successful businesses, when the rescue squad or the fire department, people need help, usually the business community will pitch in. And the more business we can promote, successful businesses that we feel are proper for our community, I think the better our community is going to become. We need income. You people need income. And we don't seem to know where it's going to come from. Volunteers hardly exist anymore. So we can't get the help we used to be able to get to do some of the things we like to see done. And I think with a profitable business community, we can move forward and meet some of our needs. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Mr. L, I just wanted, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm kind of, that committee you referenced, I'm trying to get that going.
Good.
If you're
Please
interested,
contact me. I'd love to.
yeah, could you have a business card or something, or?
I have his
No.
contact info.
Okay.
I can get it to you.
I'll reach out to you at some
Please.
point during the week. Sure.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Appreciate it.
Anyone else from the public? Motion to close?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Consent agenda items. Do I do these one by one, or do
You
we
can
want
do
to
them
do
all
them all together? Okay. We need an alcohol and beverage license for the Harvest Moon in the Amwell Valley Fire Company. Approval of a social affairs permit for Doug Main Education Foundation for an event at the Ridge at Backbrook. Approval of social affairs permit for Amwell Valley Fire Company for an event at Ridge at Backbrook. And a blue light resolution for Brendan Ryan. Could I have a motion to approve those 4 items?
I'll move the aforementioned items.
I'll second.
All in favor? Oh, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now up to item 13. We have aren't we are approving these ordinances, correct?
It says adoption.
It's a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at this. I'm sorry. Okay.
That's just my.
Thank you. I got confused. Okay, we are looking at adopting this evening 3 ordinances, and there'll be a public hearing for each one of these, so the public will have an opportunity to speak on each of the 3. The first ordinance, which we introduced last month, is an ordinance amending our bed and breakfast ordinance. Can I have a, oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The legal notice was published in the Hunterdon County Democrat on May 16th, 2019, and it was posted and available to the public since introduction on May 9th, 2019.
Move we open to the public?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any member of the public like to speak about the bed and breakfast ordinance? Motion to close?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, a
I have
motion.
to do a roll call
Okay.
vote. Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sobieski?
Yes.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
The adoption notice will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat.
Okay, next on the agenda is an ordinance amending our code to eliminate the subdivision review committee and establish an application review committee.
This legal notice was published in the Hunterdon County Democrat on May 16th, 2019, and it was posted and available to the public since introduction on May 9th, 2019.
And this is really just part of an initiative that we've taken at the planning board to try to streamline the process for residents that come in for approval, make things easier, less costly. So with that, could I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone for the public like to speak about the ordinance establishing the application review committee? Motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Krista?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sobieski?
Yes.
Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
The adoption notice will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunterdon County Democrat.
Next on the agenda is ordinance 1910. It is an ordinance amending various sections of chapter 92 of our code governing golf courses. Basically, this ordinance repeals an ordinance that was enacted in 2016, giving golf courses in the Amwell Valley Agricultural District the ability to construct tennis courts, a swimming pool, related facilities, and 2 cottages of up to 6,250 square feet each. We discussed this in detail last month when we introduced it. Could I have a motion to open to the public? Oh, sorry.
This legal notice was published in the Hunterdon County Democrat on May 16th, 2019, and it was posted and available to the public since introduction on May 9th, 2019.
Could I have a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, would anyone from the public like to speak about ordinance 19-10?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Stephen Tripp from the law firm of Glenn Skolman and Spitzer on behalf of the Richard Packbrook LLC. We're here to oppose and to object to the ordinance on a variety of grounds that I'm going to discuss. But before I get into the issues, I am going to request that Mayor Matthews and Mayor Wolf and Deputy Mayor Matthews recuse themselves from further any participation in this ordinance. And I'd like to put my reasons on the record. There have been comments made, particularly at the November 29th, 2018 meeting. It's actually the subject of a pending lawsuit that we have filed. At that meeting, Mayor Wolf and Deputy Mayor Wolf attacked the Ridge for filing a tax appeal, stated on the record that the Ridge wasn't fulfilling its obligation, indicated that the Ridge was slapping the township in the face, giving the township a giant middle finger, made the same accusations with the helistop, threatened that if Mr. Moore moves forward with the helistop, he would not attend a fundraiser at the Ridge, he wouldn't vote for a politician that has a fundraiser at the Ridge, and wouldn't support any organizations that patronize the Ridge. He stated that Mr. Moore has done nothing for this town. He indicated and stated on the record that he accused Mr. Moore of making East Amwell's life a living hell, and said he would do what he could to make Mr. Moore's life a living hell, and hope that as many people as possible in the town would join them. At the 410 Planning Board hearing on the master plan, I tried to raise these issues. The board attorney advised that that was not the correct forum. If I had these issues, go to Superior Court. I wasn't even allowed to put on the record, essentially, what our position was. We had no choice. We have now filed an action in lieu of prerogative writ. We're challenging the master plan amendment, and we're seeking Mayor Wolf's recusal. That lawsuit is pending in Hunterdon County. Deputy Mayor Matthews had similar comments on that meeting on November 29th. Stated that the Ridge wants to have its taxes cut in half, expects the residents of East Amwell to pick up the tab, that the Ridge expects the township to subsidize the golf course, and that rather than thanking the township for changing zoning to allow some accessory uses, the Ridge was litigating the appeal. The Ridge was not a good neighbor, and there were statements on the record that we believe seriously mischaracterized the accessory uses. To us, this raises a serious concern, because what's happening here is we're being attacked publicly for exercising lawful rights. The Ridge has the right to file a tax appeal, and the Ridge has the right to file a HELSTOP application with DOT. And not only does the Ridge have the right to file a tax appeal, the appeal was ultimately successful. The township settled the tax appeal. The appeal was settled on terms proposed by the township. Clearly, if it didn't have substantial merit, that would never have happened. And DOT granted the Ridge a HELSTOP license, so the Ridge satisfied the applicable criteria to obtain that. So what the Ridge has done, essentially, is exercise its rights, has obtained certain relief that it's entitled to legally, and has had to endure personal attacks on the principle of the Ridge and the Ridge itself. And we believe this has demonstrated a complete bias and prejudice, total inability to impartially and fairly consider any matters related to the Ridge, and we believe it warrants recusal. And our position regarding Mayor Wolf is set forth in our complaint that was filed. The planning board has not yet filed an answer, and we renew our position this evening on both the mayor and deputy mayor. Now, moving on to the ordinance amendments. There's a couple of things that the ordinance does, not all of which were mentioned. One is it removes the golf course as a permitted use and makes it a conditional use. So that makes every requirement for a golf course a condition of a conditional use. It also purports to take all of the design and performance standards for golf courses in section 9281 of your ordinance and make those requirements conditions of conditional use as well. The impact of the change is any relief will require a D variance with increased burden of proof and a supermajority of the board acting as a zoning board. It also does eliminate the accessory uses permitted pursuant to the 2016 amendments, as Mayor Wolf indicated. The impact is to place significant new restrictions on the Ridge, and we believe that will reduce the value of the Ridge and may impact the current tax assessment. Now, our objection has two bases. One, we don't believe there's any reasonable planning purposes, and two, we think this absolutely constitutes a retaliatory action by the township, and I'll explain why. The mayor and deputy mayor have both been very clear regarding their anger at the Ridge's exercise of its rights that I spoke about earlier, regarding tax appeal, regarding the HELSTOP. And as we noted, the Ridge was successful in both instances. One of the whereas clauses in the ordinance actually refers to the HELSTOP, but the ordinance has nothing to do with the HELSTOP. And ironically, if the township is concerned about tax appeals and about assessments and maintaining the tax base, this ordinance is going to give the Ridge the ability to seek further reductions. The elimination of the right to have certain accessory uses that are typical to golf courses, making the golf course a conditional use, will clearly have an impact adverse on value and could provide a basis for future tax appeals. Additionally, current permitted accessory uses would all require planning board approval and public hearing, and if approved, would result in increased ratables. So there's an impact here that we don't think has been properly considered. In terms of other substantive bases for opposing this ordinance, changing the status to the conditional use is problematic for a number of reasons. We believe the Ridge was approved in 1999 as a permitted use. It's been operating since 2002 as a permitted use. We don't see any legitimate purpose in making a golf course a conditional use other than to make it more difficult for the Ridge to obtain any relief, which to us is obviously the point of this, is simply to make life more difficult for us without any benefit to us or the township. Absolutely no planning reason why the requirement should now be conditional use standards. As they have been throughout the entire existence of the Ridge, they've been requirements of a permitted use, and there doesn't seem to be any basis to change that. And also, as I said earlier, the design and performance standards, which are now made a specific conditional use, it's highly problematic. We don't think design standards have any place in conditional use requirements, and many of them are subjective in nature. Conditional use standards, per the law, have to be objective, and we think a lot of these provisions, if they're enforced as conditional use standards, would be deemed invalid by a court. In terms of removal of the permitted accessory uses, these are typical accessory uses for golf course, and we think the removal 3 years after they were put into the ordinance is arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. The impact of the accessory uses has been greatly exaggerated. Any suggestion that they're going to have some dramatic consequence or adversely affect the bucolic way of life, we think is preposterous. The golf course ordinance, as a permitted use and now as a conditional use, if this ordinance is adopted, requires a minimum of 200 acres. The Ridge has 300 acres. You're talking about a swimming pool, tennis courts, guest accommodations, limited to members only, not open to the public, on a 300-acre golf course. The suggestion that somehow that's going to have some deleterious effect, particularly when the ordinance has specific conditions, the ordinance as currently written, that would limit the impact and would have to obtain planning board approval or zoning board approval if this ordinance goes through, anything could be dealt with on site plan. If there's concerns about impacts, site plan approval, even as a permitted use, would be the appropriate time to consider those, rather than just pulling them out of the ordinance and preventing the Ridge from even seeking approvals for things that are typical with golf courses. In terms of the whereas clauses, we went through the whereas clauses, and they're telling, because the majority of them are either specious or they're not even addressed in the ordinance. There was a reference to the planning board waiver of limitations on the number of people that could attend club events. Well, the planning board had made a formal recommendation to the Township Committee for a special events ordinance, and we believe it was never acted on because of the Ridge's tax appeal. Well, the ordinance amendments don't address this issue at all. There was a reference to the planning board's relaxation of water testing requirements. What in fact happened was based on the township's hydrologist's testimony on the record that there was no issue with regard to any of the testing that had been done, and the track record of favorable testing results, that the requirement of once per year was not necessary. In fact, the township's expert at the time thought that it might not be necessary to test at all, and the planning board decided to impose the requirement of once every 3 years. Totally reasonable, completely based on the record, and any suggestion that there was anything nefarious or untoward in the relaxation of that requirement is completely without merit. In terms of the helistop license, we all know DOT is the ultimate authority to determine helistop locations. The Ridge complied with the requirements. The township had the right to object. They put their objections on the record, and the license was granted. It's a very limited use. We don't expect a lot of use. And again, any suggestions that this is going to somehow have some dramatic impact, we think is again preposterous. And really, the reference in the whereas clause, it really demonstrates that the township is really reacting to things that it doesn't have control over by using the zoning power as a retaliatory action, and we think that's inappropriate. In terms of the alleged impacts of the 2016 amendments, as I said, we believe the impacts have been greatly exaggerated, And if site plan approval was ever sought, we would have had the opportunity to be able to demonstrate that in a public forum. In terms of the reference to complaints about noise, there's nothing in the ordinance regarding noise, nor should there be. That issue is properly addressed, as we know, through police power, state or local noise codes. It's not in the ordinance. Again, it's another red herring that's in the whereas clauses of the ordinance. So our question here is, why is this only aimed at golf courses? There's other uses in the AVAD that has the potential for environmental and other impacts. And there, for example, the Vineyard in town has annual events with live music. There are private airstrips. There's other uses that generate potential impacts. No one other than the Ridge is the subject of this ordinance. We are completely targeted by these provisions, and no one else is affected. In terms of the land use element, we challenged the element both on the basis of Mayor Wolf's participation and on its substance. And if that action is successful, the basis for this ordinance would fall. So we believe it's really imprudent for the township to rush to adopt this ordinance while the challenge is pending. In fact, we wonder why there's such a rush to adopt this ordinance now, to dramatically alter the regulatory framework that applies to golf courses. The only answer we can come up with is that there's a vendetta against the Ridge and the retaliatory action is being taken. We think the better course of action would be to let cooler heads prevail. We certainly, as I stated before the planning board, would be willing to sit down with the committee or a subcommittee, discuss the concerns, and try to rationally come up with some procedure for moving forward and to really address what the true concerns are, as opposed to having this done in the manner in which it's occurring at this point, which we think is totally wrong. All that's going to happen from this is more litigation, more expenses to the township, more expenses to the Ridge, and we're never going to really be able to sit down and focus on the issues. That's what we really would like to do. And I know at the last meeting, at the end of the meeting, Mayor Wolf made a statement that he resents the Ridge bullying and what he perceives as trying to push the township around, and whenever something is raised that we don't like, we speak up. Well, we take offense at those characterizations because we feel that what's been going on over the last few months is exactly what we've been accused of doing. We're being personally attacked for exercising rights that the Ridge has and in fact has successfully exercised. And the township is acting in a manner that you know will result in litigation. And in fact, you're encouraging the litigation because when I tried to at least have a discussion about conflicts of interest, the board attorney said, don't do it here, go to Superior Court, basically telling us if we had an issue, sue us. And unfortunately, that's what we had to do. We had no choice. So we think this is nothing more than the township improperly deploying its zoning power to push back against other things that we have done, that we have the right to do, that we've pursued properly, successfully, and within the bounds of the law. And again, all the Ridge has done here is exercise lawful rights, and that's why we're here tonight.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. During these hearings, you're not limited to 10 minutes. I'm sorry. I should have clarified that. Yeah. Let Chris.
Yeah, I would just like to address the recusal issue because, first off, my name is Chris Norman and I'm the planning board attorney. The recusal issue was first brought up during the master plan hearing on the land use plan amendment addressing the golf course. That hearing concerned planning issues and strictly planning issues. And my role as the planning board attorney is to make sure that the discussion and debate relates to planning issues. And that was the basis for saying that the allegations made regarding motives, tax appeals and whatnot, they have nothing to do with land use. So from the standpoint of the discussion of the hearing at the planning board, my concern was keep the discussions to planning issues. And if there's other issues you want to raise in another forum, you can raise them in another forum. Vis-a-vis the issue of recusal tonight, I do not believe that there's a need for recusal. Mr. Wolf and all of the members of the Township Committee are elected officials. And as elected officials, they get to decide zoning policy matters. And if every time a resident or property owner was dissatisfied with a decision by your elected official, and you went to court and you asked for an injunction that said that they can't do their job as an elected official, I mean, that's a problem. I don't think it's legal. I think if an application is made to seek an injunction to keep a councilman or a committee member from doing their job, I don't think a court's going to respect that, because for one thing, the court is a co-equal branch of government to the legislature. This is your legislature here. Court cannot become a super legislator and substitute court's judgment for our elected officials. So as far as the recusal issue goes, I don't believe there is one. So.
Well, in our opinion, I mean, I understand the law. I'm very familiar with the law you're quoting. But the fact of the matter is that there are instances when it's appropriate, and there are cases when a public official takes a personal interest in a matter and loses their impartiality, they can be precluded from participating. And we believe, and I agree with you, it's extraordinary, but I think the circumstances here are quite extraordinary, because in all my years of practicing, I've never seen this type of personal, vituperative attacks consistently on the record, and comments made about making somebody's life a living hell. And when you look at the context of it, it demands recusal, and I have great confidence that a judge will scrutinize and take a good look at this, precisely because of the context that I just described.
Well, once again, I think we're going far astray from the purpose of the ordinance. We're diverging into tangential arguments for why you don't like the ordinance.
Well,
and
it's not
those
tangential.
Those are issues really not for this forum. This forum and this hearing tonight is on the ordinance itself and the substance and the merits of the ordinance.
Well,
So.
it goes to the heart of what we're saying. We don't feel we're being treated fairly. We feel we're being targeted, and we feel that this is all part of a payback for certain things that the Ridge had the right to do. And that goes to both why we think there's conflicts and why we think the ordinance is tainted, and why we will have no choice but to challenge it.
Anyone else from the public like to speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Richard Miller. I live on Manners Road for almost 50 years now. I'm in love with the township. That's why I've been here 50 years. I've seen it grow very slowly, thankfully. I've also seen the township do everything they can to preserve open space, acquire it, and I'm grateful for that also. When the golf course moved here, I saw that as additional free open space for the township. I don't know Mr. Moore. I never met Mr. Moore. I'm not a golf aficionado, but I do pass by his business 5 or 6 times a week. It looks to me to be an asset to the township. I don't know what burden the golf course places on his township. I don't know if Mr. Moore has 1 child or 10, but I don't see him as impacting our school at all. I don't know exactly what issue the township or a certain person has with this individual, but this document here that I received by registered mail caused me to go do some digging. And I've read the full 28 pages of the lawsuit, and I've read this. This is a vile, evil, disgraceful, vindictive amendment that you folks are going to sit up there and in your conscience go along with trying to tell some golf business, a new business that might be coming into town, how they need to operate. Now, I know for a fact, Mr. Moore, when he came here, we act like, well, he's a bad neighbor. I don't understand why he's a bad neighbor. Because he wants to put a pool and some tennis courts up there? I don't know how many people here have pools in their backyards or tennis courts. I've seen those. As a matter of fact, we have tennis courts right here in the township park. Apparently, there's something evil there. It makes it a bad neighbor. We must be bad neighbors. The township. It's ridiculous when you read here what you folks, I don't know who the golf expert is here, who decided that we're going to put crap in here like they can't use gas-powered carts. They have to have a tee 150 foot from a certain edge. All we do with this is discourage any new business from coming into town. I said I don't play golf, but when I was younger, I do remember playing what they called pitch and putt courses, which are far less acreage than you're specifying in here. There's also par 3 courses, which are far less acreage, which is in here. I would like this to be the township of golf courses. I was raised in Queens, New York, and it was known as the borough of cemeteries. We had that many cemeteries in Queens. I wish East Amwell could be the township of golf courses. I don't see how they create any burden on the township and they preserve green space. This is the result of one person saying, I'm going to make another person's life a living hell. And each one of you people sitting up there is going to support that. I would ask you to look deeply in your conscience and say, is this really good for the township? This silly, inane crap that's in here to be vindictive against one person? Apparently, in 2016, Mr. Moore came to the township and asked for a few concessions. When Mr. Moore came to the township in 2000, the township asked for some concessions. They said, we don't want you having your driveway on a township road, Backbrook Road. You can't do that. Your driveway has to be on a county road because we don't want to have to plow or maintain a road or watch that traffic. He complied. He was also asked to provide an equestrian trail circling the entire golf course. It almost held a gun to the man's head to do this. He complied. He was also asked to provide monitoring wells, which I fully agree with. And I think they should be maintained and checked regularly. He complied. To the best of my knowledge, the man has complied with every law. I haven't seen him broken any law. It's implied in here that apparently residents in the township or neighbors feel he's a nuisance for some reason. I don't understand that. I wish the golf course had adjoined my property. I know my property value would go right up tomorrow. I think who's ever complaining about that, maybe they're just a chronic complainer. Maybe that's the person that rides around these condo associations and HMOs and writes down people's names because they have a black curtain instead of a white one. I'm going to ask you, please, look and dig deep in your conscience and say, is this truly what we should be spending our time with? Should I have to come down here and spend my time with this? Certainly none of you up there that are agreeing to this will ever lose the next election by one vote. But if you do, it'll be mine. Let me just say in closing, one of the things that sort of stunned me a little bit tonight, I don't come to many meetings. I guess I'm not a good citizen, or as good as I should be. But we all stood and said the Pledge of Allegiance. And the last phrase kind of really struck me in my heart that said justice for all. And I feel that apparently some people in front of me here don't subscribe to that feeling. And I feel ashamed for that. And I feel ashamed for the township that they are allowing themselves to pass something like this. Thank you.
Richie?
I guess I'm the only one in here from 5, 6, and 7 that voted on the original ordinance. So let's see how it happens. When Mr. Moore came to town, he didn't really come on his own. We had a problem up there. We were going for building homes and preserving land. So what are we going to do? It came to the committee back then that there was a possibility of as much as 40 homes up there.
Could you put the speaker?
40 homes. Okay? What are we going to do about that? So along
You hear
comes,
him now in the back? Okay.
so along comes Mr. Moore. And we spent a lot of time back then. You have seen nothing here what you see tonight. Okay? So we took it really deep and really hard to put that ordinance together that you're trying to tear apart. But I'll tell you what, I haven't heard here yet tonight. 2018, Mr. Moore paid $261,000 plus in taxes. $261,000 plus. Did you tell the people that in your letter you sent out? No, you don't want to tell them that. No, because you want everything to be your side of the coin. See, maybe you got a two-headed coin. I think more like a two-tailed coin. All right? But the problem is here that what the gentleman before me just says, what kind of people are we in this town? You don't even turn around and try to listen to your previous elected people or read what we went through back then to get this golf course built. Now, people come in here and say traffic. Well, agreement was made there too, and by the county freeholders, which I heard you say, that I know the freeholders went with this, but I feel that we have a right in town. So that makes me sound you're going against the freeholders. That I don't like. That I don't like, because the freeholders were in this room, and we did do a lot of discussion, okay? Now, here's the problem. There'll be no traffic. There never was. There's been tournaments up there that you won't even know about. It was agreed upon that if they ever went for a top tournament, LTG, USG, whatever they are, that the county freeholders said they'll be able to use South County Park to park in. That's where they're going to park. There'll be no traffic down here at the golf course. They're going to park at the county or fire, any place we got big, fire department, schoolyard. And here's the thing, use school buses to transport the people back and forth. Now, isn't that revenue for the school bus company? Aren't they going to get a little more money here? I think they are, okay? Now, not only is the biggest taxpayer, I think he's pretty good at donating money too in this town. I haven't talked to the rescue squad yet, but I think I'd like to see that. How much money has he donated to the rescue squad, to the fire department, since he's been here in East Amwell, okay? So what does he want to do? He wants to make some improvements. Well, what are the improvements going to do? We all know. You got to put a shower curtains or a new shower stall in your bathroom. You got to come down and get a building permit. And the tax assessor comes out and figures how much it's worth. My buddy did that one time. He put all gold in his house. He loved gold. And he was shocked how much his taxes went up. And that's a true story. I'm not making that one up. So here's the thing. If he puts golf courses, and he puts a pool, and he puts housing, I know if I was Jack Nicklaus, I wouldn't want to go down and stay at the Ramada. I know that. I like to stay in something nice on a golf course. And I never spent any time on a golf course myself either, okay? So here's where we're at. He's going to improve his property. And believe me when I tell you that the traffic's out of the question here, because I can show you that in writing. And I'm sure you read it too. I think it was something like that even in paragraphs in the tax settlement, wasn't there? I think so. I remember a paragraph in there about that. I'd have to look back. I do so much reading lately. I didn't like that reading. So it's going to increase his taxes. Come on. It's going to increase his taxes. You're talking about golf carts being, can't have gas golf carts. Do they have gas golf carts up there? Does anybody play golf?
Yeah, they're all like,
Battery, right? That's what I thought. That's what I thought. So why is it even in there? Why is it even in there? That's why this thing is so ridiculous. You're putting things in there that are ridiculous. And I'm hoping, okay, they err on the side of caution here and get a little backbone. And if it's better for the town, for the greater good, to recuse yourself, show that you're going to support the people of this Amwell in this town, and not look for more tax deductions from lawsuits and lawyers' fees, all right? I just don't understand that, but here's something that everybody else, because I know our attorney doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to answer questions, but I think the other people up there should understand, if there is a violation at any time during a meeting, okay, and I'll read that one to you too. Any member of a body to exclude himself from penalties, he shall inform the body that he feels a violation has happened. Reasons why shall be in the minutes. That's free. And I forgot to mention my quotes tonight to be for the record. Okay. Now, he can also ask for a vote to see how everybody else feels. And if he loses on the vote, he has still covered himself from any fines from the state. Now, here's the problem about the fines. Doesn't come out of the budget, fellas. It comes out of your pocket.
Richie?
Yes,
You were involved in the original ordinance?
that's right. 5, 6, and 7. We were sitting right. I was sitting right.
And the gas golf carts are dumb?
You put it in this ordinance, am I
Richie,
correct?
the gas golf carts is in the original ordinance.
Right, because
You
back
did
then
it.
they,
You did what was done.
but I just said they don't use it, and I
Richie,
asked. They're using
Richie, we didn't add that. That's in the original ordinance.
right, but what I'm
The
saying
materials
is,
you're reading are in the ordinance that
Okay.
you said you approved, which, by the way, you didn't. You
Who did?
weren't on the original ordinance. You weren't on the
that
board
was in the
when original
90s, but when
ordinance.
that ordinance came through and finalized
Richie,
to the public.
you have your chronology
was
all
it-
wrong.
What?
You have your chronology all wrong. You weren't on the board when this ordinance was passed.
5, 6, and 7, I sat right
It was
there and
passed
voted
in
for it.
'99, Richie.
I didn't say I was in 99. You're trying to switch the words
All right,
again.
Richie.
You're pretty good at that.
Ah,
I
no,
said when the
I'm
ordinance was introduced,
I'm done. Thank you,
for the
Richie.
record, right there I sat 2, 5, 6, and 7. You're talking about the previous discussions when they brought Mr. Moore into town.
Thank
I told
you,
you once
Richie.
before, don't put words in my mouth.
Thank you.
Don't put words in my mouth. By the way, you still editing minutes?
Thank you, Richie. By the way, just for the audience, for the record, the stuff that the last two gentlemen talked about, the golf carts versus electric, that is not the subject of the change tonight. That was in the original ordinance. We're not adding that sort of restriction, just to be clear.
it just looks a little silly.
Any, it's silliness we inherited. We didn't.
Well, I figured
we
I'd
didn't
give you
put it in.
something to throw out here.
Anybody else from the
Go without
public
saying
like
the
to
last
speak?
word.
The gentleman, yes, you, sir.
And you always wait till the back is turned, by the way. Can't say it to anybody's face.
Good evening. Rod Whiten, Ringos. So as I sit here today and hear both sides, I feel like it's national politics. And it's no longer about law or anything else. It's just personal vendettas. One side hates the other. And you know, I asked, you know, when did this stop? You know, when did politics stop being about working for the town and for the people? And it's just like a personal vendetta. And I understand you may not like Mr. Moore, and trust me, I get it. But I just feel the two sides are going after each other. And, you know, you're trying to hurt Mr. Moore and the Ridge. You're not hurting Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore's not paying for these attorneys sitting here. The members are. Plain and simple. And the money that you're going to have to spend, the township is going to have to spend, isn't coming much out of your pockets. It's all the taxpayers' money. And I think just cooler heads need to prevail. And, I would ask before the vote, just stop for 1 minute and just say, how do we work together? How can we coexist? Hearing, people about drumming up business here and wanting more, and the rescue squad, and I'm very familiar with the rescue squad, needing more money. Why can't the two sides sit together and say, what can we do to work together? How can we raise money for the town? Hearing that we don't want a PGA event here, I think is silly. The PGA gives millions of dollars a year every year to charity. And there's wonderful charities here that are desperate for money. And I know for a fact this town has done wonderful things for a charity. And I know, Mr. Wolf, you personally have done wonderful things for a charity. So to say, when I read these things, and I don't know if they're true or not, that, you won't attend a function of a charity, I mean, that's just silly. And, so I would just say, relax. The two sides need to coexist. The Ridge pays a lot of money in taxes. And before this just turns into something crazy, just sit down and see how the two sides can work together. And if Mr. Wolf and Mr. Moore can't agree on, I mean, take them out. Have somebody else sit in and somebody else sit in from the Ridge and just see how we can work together. The rescue squad needs $150,000. Well, what can we do to raise that money to help them? How do we get people out here to go to the wineries and go to the great restaurants and do that? And how do we coexist? So that's all.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Yeah, I didn't hear your name either.
Rod Whiten,
And your address?
4 Riverview Court, Ringgoes.
Okay. That's what I thought, okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Ken Doherty, 9 Rainbow Hill Road. Just simply am opposed to adoption of the ordinance. I see nothing compelling leading us to get that we need this proposed ordinance passed. And as a property owner, I find it troubling that anything that would restrict or roll back property rights that already exist for anyone in any real estate entity, I find a real problem with that. So without a compelling reason for this, I feel as much as this affects the golf course, it affects each one of us. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Move we close? Oh,
No, hang on. I feel like I'm at an auction. Going once, going twice.
Noreen Bailey, 129 Backbrook Road. I've been at a lot of these meetings for the golf course. I'm a neighbor of the golf course. Mr. Moore may not believe me. I'm not against golf courses or anything. I grew up in a golfing family. Everybody in my family has golfed and traveled around to many golf courses. I have some issues, though, with it and the way things are going. I didn't mind the original ordinance. I question, though, adding all this other stuff to it because it was always advertised as a strictly golf course, pure golf course. And now we're changing, he changed it over the last 2 years or so. Let me speak as somebody that has lived by a golf course growing up that had PGA tournaments and stuff. People say it's not a burden. I've lived it. It is. Yes, it brings a lot of traffic. I know they're saying that they would have buses come back and forth from the fairgrounds. Where I lived, we had what they call the quarry. They were going to bus people in back and forth with buses then for a number of the golf courses. And it closed down roads. It brought in a lot of things. People right across from the golf course would park cars, have cars parking, and then they would put sod in later because they made so much money. They It is a different kind of atmosphere. I don't see how East Amwell could be able to handle it. We don't have the restaurants. We don't have the hotels. We don't have that in this area. People would have to travel for a distance. Like I said, I've lived it. I would hate to see this at East Amwell. I know they say that they will divert traffic and everything. I've seen how people get around it. They want to get up close, take a drive-by and stuff. They want to see somebody famous and stuff. It is a mess. I can see people parking cars on farms in the area. Not everybody's going to want a bus. Some people don't want to wait for the bus to take them back to their cars. They walk. Wurtsville Road has no place to walk and stuff. I'm not, like I said, I'm not against golfing. I'm not against small venues and stuff, but big ones, I don't see how we can handle it. As far as being a good neighbor, I'll give you an example. I spoke out against the golf course once. Within a couple of days, I have a deer fencing put up against me and my next door neighbor because she also spoke out. There's not deer fencing anywhere else that I can see around the golf course. It was just within a matter of the week, it went up against our houses. We had Memorial Day weekend recently. Why we were brush hogging a field that they don't even use at 6 o'clock in the morning, I don't know. And you hear the grinding and stuff and everything. I almost called somebody because it woke me up. And I'm like, 6 o'clock in the morning on a holiday weekend, why are you brush hogging a field you're not even using? It was loud and disgusting, you know. Like I said, I am not against golf courses. I've lived by a golf course growing up. I have a family that everybody in my family golfed. But there's some things I can't see going on here in East Amwell. We're not set up for it, and I don't want to see East Amwell destroyed by it, you know. But that's it.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Jamie?
And if I could just mention, if the audience would remain silent while someone's speaking, it would be greatly appreciated. Rich? It's distracting up here when we're trying to focus on what someone's saying. You're over there chattering next to your neighbor.
He is all right. We can hear fine.
I can't.
Well, that's
Sir.
no problem.
Sir, it's my job to listen and focus.
So I can't move around, is that what you're saying? Don't move around?
No, you were.
Nobody spoke when Richie was speaking. Show the gentleman
I didn't hear him speaking.
He was speaking and it was distracting.
Must be in the cyber world or something.
Guys, come on, can we be adults here? Thank you.
Go ahead, Jamie, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Jamie Atkinson, resident 201 Wurtsville Road, Ringgoes. I just want to say that I respect anyone and everyone who's come to give their opinion about this. I think that's important. And I hope that, well, I just think that's important, that we show respect for everyone that's going to share their opinion, and that we not make it impossible for someone to be a good, decent citizen if their opinion differs from our own. I'm in support of the ordinance. I was thrilled to be a neighbor of the golf course back in 2003 when we moved in. I think I had a good understanding of how the arrangement came about, and I thought it was a very good one. I thought it was a creative balance. As the gentleman from Manners Road indicated, it seemed to be very much in line and a good fit with preserving open space and allowing for businesses to be a part of the community. My feeling in 2019 now is that balance is no longer there. And I would like, so I favor I favor returning in some ways to that original agreement, if we can. I think that's really all I have to say tonight. But
Thank you, Jamie.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? Going once, going twice? Okay, motion to close to the public?
So moved. No, all second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, before we go to a vote, I'd like to say a few things. I'm going to ask the committee to indulge me because this is going to take a little while. But I think I feel compelled to say what I'm about to say. Mr. Moore and his attorneys have called into question the integrity of myself and Mr. Matthews, the integrity of our planning board, ultimately the integrity of this township committee. Probably, if I were acting purely as a lawyer, I would sit here and say nothing and we'd go right to the vote, but I feel compelled to respond. It's in my nature, as all of you know. I'm going to start by telling you why I ran for office, and that's going to become relevant to this discussion in a few minutes. I've come to the conclusion that the problem with most elected officials today is that they forget that they're public servants. As a public servant, an elected official is supposed to serve the public, the elected official's constituents. Too often these days, elected officials seek to carry out their own desires, the desires of their party, the desires of large donors, special interests, or lobbyists, and that's just wrong. I believe that as members of this township committee, our role, indeed our duty, is to do the best we can to improve the quality of life for the residents in East Amwell. And when I say residents, I mean all the residents, not just Republicans or Democrats or unaffiliated voters, not just those who support us, not just those who share our views on various issues. I mean all the residents. And I take this very seriously. I spend as much time as I can interacting with our residents. I attend numerous local functions and make myself readily available to all residents. I want to know what the residents think, and I actively solicit their input. If a resident raises a concern, I address it as promptly as I can. If the resident is not being treated fairly, I will go to bat for that resident. Do I deserve a pat on the back for this? No. That is what a public servant is supposed to do. I'm very passionate in carrying out my role as a public servant, and am very blunt in my delivery. I doubt that anyone at this dais will dispute that. Typically, people know exactly where I stand on an issue. It's the way I conduct myself in my legal practice and in life in general. I've been advised by some that my blunt nature is not optimal from a political perspective. Since I don't consider myself to be a politician and have no desire to be a politician, I pay little attention to this advice. I'm a public servant, and my focus is not on politics, but rather on serving the residents of East Amwell, serving them to the best of my ability. I want to take a minute and talk about a solar field, and that too will become relevant in a few minutes. My first real opportunity to test my belief regarding the role of a public official came not long after I became a member of this township committee in 2017. An elderly resident who has resided in East Amwell for decades lives next to a commercial solar field. She, her family, and her neighbor had repeatedly told the township committee that the company that constructed and operates the solar field did not fulfill promises it made to the township as part of the approval process for the solar field. Specifically, it did not provide adequate screening between the solar field and the resident's house. It damaged the resident's driveway, and it created other problems for the resident. Their pleas for help from the township committee seemed for the most part to fall on deaf ears. When I became a member of the township committee, I felt it was my duty as a public servant to assist this resident, and that's what I did. I did extensive research on the history of the solar field. I discovered that there was a development agreement between East Amwell and the solar company, and concluded that the solar company did not fulfill some of its obligations under that agreement. That gave me a sound basis to fight on behalf of the resident and her family. In the course of attempting to assist the residents, I encountered resistance from a fellow Township Committee member, David Wong Iverson. I'd like to read to you a passage from an email I sent to David. David, I'm not surprised by your comment about the effort you're willing to make, or more accurately, not willing to make, to get the solar company to fulfill its obligations under the developer's agreement. You handled this badly from inception, and unfortunately, Mrs. Reinerson is suffering the consequences. Let me be clear on one point. You may not care about Mrs. Reinerson, but I do. She is 89 years old and doesn't deserve spending the remaining years on this earth staring at solar panels. This township let her down, and I'm not going to allow that to continue. Thus, I will strongly support going to war with the solar company to get them to honor their obligations under the developer's agreement. I made similar going to war type statements at Township Committee meetings and to residents of East Amwell. I made it quite clear that I thought the solar company behaved badly, and I was not going to allow the solar company to bully either Mrs. Reinerson or the township. I was very blunt and very clear in my message. In the end, after a significant amount of time and effort, I got the solar company to provide additional screening between its field and Mrs. Reinerson's house and to compensate her for the damage to her driveway. Do I deserve praise or credit for getting this result? Absolutely not. That's what a public servant is supposed to do. Serve the public. You're probably asking yourself, what relevance does this have to the matter at hand? I'll come to that later. The Ridge's Helistop. Fast forward to October 2018. I'm now the deputy mayor, and I received from our clerk a copy of a letter from the lawyer for the Ridge, stating that the Ridge had applied to the NJDOT for a helistop license, a license that would allow helicopters to take off and land from the Ridge. Initially, I didn't know how to react to this. I knew nothing about helistops, knew next to nothing about the Ridge, and knew nothing about the Ridge's prior attempts to get our planning board to approve a helistop on its golf course. In fact, I knew very little about helicopters other than they were very loud and seemed to not infrequently crash. Following the receipt of the letter from the Ridge's lawyer, we notified other potentially interested committees of the Ridge's helistop application and posted it on our website. As word of the application spread, residents began contacting Tim Matthews, who was the mayor at the time, and myself. At first, it was just a few residents, but that number quickly grew to many. With one exception, the residents were against, generally strongly against, having helicopters land and take off from the Ridge. Tim and I quickly realized that the Ridge's helistop application was a major concern for a large number of residents. Figuring that it probably had significant legal component, I offered to take the lead on the matter, and Tim agreed. As was the case with the solar field, I felt that as a public servant, it was my duty to investigate the residents' concerns and determine if they were legitimate or instead just knee-jerk reactions. I learned from several residents, including planning board members, that between 2005 and 2008, the Ridge had come before the planning board 2 or 3 times seeking approval for a helistop. Each time, numerous residents spoke out against the helistop, and each time the planning board rejected the request. A number of residents and others explained to me that when the township approved the golf course, it was never envisioned that helicopters would be taking off and landing from the Ridge. They told me that the Ridge was supposed to be a low-impact, pure golf course that would not interfere with the agricultural activities in the area, would be environmentally friendly, and would accommodate the horse riding trail that went around the Ridge. One of those people was Grace Thompson, whose husband, Bryce Thompson, had sold the Ridge most of the property upon which it constructed its golf course. Grace was absolutely livid and offered to do whatever she and Thompson Realty could do to stop the helistop. I did a bit of poking around and determined that sometime following the prior planning board hearings, the NJDOT had changed its policy regarding helistops, and that local planning board approval is no longer a condition to obtaining a helistop license. In other words, I learned that under current policy of the NJDOT, the Ridge could completely bypass our planning board, completely ignore our golf course ordinance, and most importantly, completely discard the view of the neighbors and residents. At this point, I had a gut feeling that I was dealing with an issue that is critically important to a significant number of residents, that I likely would be fighting an uphill battle, and that we were up against a local business that didn't seem to care about our rules or its neighbors. My research regarding the Ridge. Although I had no reason to doubt what the residents told me about the understanding the township had with the Ridge regarding its golf course, as a lawyer I felt that, in order to take a position on this issue, I needed objective evidence to support their statements that the Ridge was not behaving in accordance with that understanding. I also knew that I would need objective evidence in order to try to convince the NJDOT not to grant the helistop license to the Ridge. Accordingly, I set about on what became a very long and enlightening journey exploring the history of the Ridge. My findings, which are summarized in a letter I sent on behalf of the Township Committee to the NJDOT last January, as well as updates I posted on the Township's website, proved quite informative. I'll briefly summarize them. First, I discovered that in the course of seeking approval for the Ridge's golf course, its owner, Mr. Moore, made the following representations to our planning board and to the residents of East Amwell. I quote, "There will be no other recreational activities on the property besides golf. There will be no residents and only golf, with no pool or other recreational facilities. The Ridge will be strictly a private golf course with no pool or tennis courts and no residents. Regarding outside tournaments, this course will be of a quality that would support any type of event available in the U.S., but the professional tour is not wanted on this course, since it is an imposition on members for between 4 to 6 weeks and may damage the course. It is a private club with a membership cap of 275 members. No unaccompanied guest play is allowed at the club. Greens cutting will begin no earlier than 6:30 a.m. I also discovered that in the recent past, Mr. Moore had made similar statements about the passive nature of the Ridge in several magazine articles, including one currently posted on the Ridge's website. Second, and very importantly, Mr. Moore said that he will attempt to strike a balance between the development and the environment in order to create linkages and reestablish linkages for wildlife on the subject site. He further agreed that his plans for the golf course would take measures intended to encourage habitation by birds and other desirable species, and that out-of-play areas would be designated with the intention to attract birds, would be designed with the intention to attract birds, beneficial insects, and butterflies. Third, Mr. Moore agreed that as a condition to approval of his golf course, he would grant a perpetual horse trail easement around the perimeter of the golf course. Fourth, throughout the approval process, Mr. Moore, his lawyers, and our planning board frequently told residents that an important benefit of allowing the Ridge to construct its golf course is that the Ridge would generate significant property tax revenue for the township. Finally, virtually every time the Ridge sought an approval from our planning board, Mr. Moore and his lawyers would state, as a reason why the approval should be granted, that, and I'll quote from Mr. Moore himself, "The Ridge has proven to be a very good neighbor without any problems or instances to the township or any of its neighbors." Now let me tell you the truth. My research uncovered that in the years since the approval of his golf course, Mr. Moore has acted contrary to virtually all of his representations. For example, Mr. Moore has sought and continues to seek to have his golf club go from a pure golfing facility to a country club, which is directly contrary to the statement he made to the township and in magazine articles about his burning desire to have a pure golf club. In 2016, our planning board and township committee, by a 3-2 vote, approved an ordinance giving the Ridge the right to construct a swimming pool, tennis courts, related facilities, whatever that means, and 2 6,250 square foot cottages for overnight housing. That same year, our planning board waived the limitation on the number of people who could attend an event at the Ridge and recommended to the Township Committee that it adopt an ordinance allowing large-scale events at the Ridge. At every available opportunity, Mr. Moore has challenged the Ridge's property tax assessment, thus undermining his representation to the Township regarding significant property tax revenue. He sought to undo the environmental safeguards that were in place as part of the approval process. Contrary to his repeated assertions, he has not been a good neighbor. For example, according to his neighbors, loud cutting and blowing activities commence well before 6:30 a.m., and at times during the summer, loud fans run all night on the golf course. In fact, when I was knocking on doors around the Ridge in 2016 as part of my campaign, numerous residents complained to me about Joel and the Ridge. He was well aware the township and his residents were against having helicopters land at and take off from his golf course. And yet, as soon as he had an opportunity to do so, he circumvented the township rules and the clear, unambiguous views of his neighbors and went to the NJDOT for approval of a helistop license. What I also found very disturbing is that in 2008, when Mr. Moore sought from our planning board for the second or third time approval of the helistop, he was asked why, if the helistop is so important to the golf course, the Ridge didn't ask for the helistop when it sought approval of its golf course in 2000. The resolution from the public hearing states the following. The entire soliloquy prompted another planning board member to inquire why applicant, the Ridge, did not seek approval for the helistop back in 2000 when the golf course was approved. The applicant conceded that the helistop was admitted from the site plan at that time to ensure that the golf course approval would be granted. To me, this implied that Mr. Moore knew that the helistop was inconsistent with the representations he made to the township in order to obtain approval of the golf course in 2000. I found this bait and switch behavior quite disturbing and certainly not consistent with being a good neighbor. Finally, I discovered and found very troubling that when township officials, or in one case township residents, took issue with Mr. Moore's proposals, he threatened them with a lawsuit. To me, this is not consistent with being a good neighbor. The result. This research did two things. First, it led me to conclude that, as numerous residents told me, the helistop proposed by the Ridge was not consistent with the representations Mr. Moore made to the planning board and the residents as part of the approval process for his golf course. Worse yet, by his own admission, he knew that, which is why he didn't ask for it as part of the process. Second, the research led me to ask myself the following question. Why has our planning board been so accommodating in allowing Mr. Moore, contrary to the representations he made as part of the original approval process, to potentially take the Ridge from a pure golf club to a country club, complete with overnight housing, tennis courts, a pool, and the right to have tens of thousands of people transcend upon our small town for PGA tournaments? To me, this seemed flatly contrary to our master plan and the norms that make East Amwell what it is today. I'll speak more on this second point later. My discussion with Lightfinger. In addition to the research I was doing on the Ridge, I contacted Jerry Lightfinger, the engineer at NJDOT overseeing the Ridge's helistop license application. Jerry gave me useful information about the application process and the likelihood of the application being approved. There was one thing, however, that really caught my attention. Jerry told me it's relatively easy to get a helistop license if you own a large parcel of land in a rural area. In response to this statement, I told Jerry that I own 94 acres in East Amwell and asked him whether, if I wanted to travel back and forth to New York City each day by helicopter, could I get a helistop license as long as I kept the landing pad at least 1,000 feet away from the nearest home? Jerry's response was, I likely could get a helistop license. I found Jerry's statements quite troubling because they effectively meant that East Amwell could be punished for its successful farmland preservation efforts. In other words, because East Amwell has been incredibly successful in preserving large parcels of farmland, we could wind up with helicopters routinely landing in and taking off for our farms, for no good public purpose. The impact that could have on the bucolic environment that we work so hard to achieve in East Amwell, the impact it could have on our wildlife, and the impact it could have on our water resources if there were a crash caused me great concern. In other words, I felt that the Ridge's helistop license had potential to open Pandora's box in our small township. The November 28th public hearing. As most of you know, the Township Committee held a special meeting on November 28th regarding the Ridge's Helistop license application. We did this for two reasons. First, we asked a highly experienced helicopter pilot and the deputy fire chief of the Amwell Valley Fire Company to attend the meeting and explain to the residents, in the case of the helicopter pilot, the aeronautics, cost, noise levels, and other matters pertaining to helicopters, and in the case of the deputy fire chief, what would happen if there were a helicopter crash or other mishap at or near the ridge. Second, we wanted to give interested residents the opportunity to express their views in a public forum before the Township Committee. About 80 residents attended the meeting. That's an incredible number of people to attend a Township meeting, way beyond anything I experienced in my time on the Township Committee. Many of the residents spoke, and without exception, those who spoke were against the Helistop for a variety of reasons. Without exception, those who spoke felt quite strongly about the issue. There was also a fair amount of useful discussion between the helicopter pilot and the deputy fire chief on the one hand and the residents on the other, and I found that discussion quite helpful. I felt that the concerns expressed by the residents, for the most part, were both legitimate and serious. Additionally, the residents reinforced many of the troubling facts I discovered about the Ridge and Mr. Moore during my research. My turn to speak. By the end of the public hearing, I had determined, as the deputy mayor of East Amwell and as a public servant, that it was my duty to do what I could to convince NJDOT not to grant the Ridge the Helistop license. I also felt that as a resident of East Amwell who has invested a significant amount in this community and who plans on staying here for the long haul, I should express my personal views. I did that, and those views play a prominent role in Mr. Moore's lawsuit. More on that follows. The Ridge's lawsuit. In its lawsuit, the Ridge seeks to overturn our land use element amendment, and according to their lawyer, will sue to overturn the ordinance we're considering this evening, mainly because of statements I made at the public hearing. The Ridge cites the following statements in its complaint. The Ridge has not behaved neighborly, and it has really started to bother me as a resident of this town. Well, I did in fact say that, and I stand behind it. My research clearly indicated that the Ridge has not behaved neighborly, and it has really started to bother me. The Ridge's tax appeal is not neighborly, and it's not doing anything to benefit this town. When the Ridge came to this town to get approval for the golf course, one of the things that they emphasized repeatedly was that they would be generating a significant amount of property tax revenue. No sooner did the Ridge complete construction on its golf course and get its first assessment, what did it do? It went and challenged the assessment. That to me ain't neighborly, and that ain't consistent with the representation that was made to this township about the property tax revenue. Mr. Moore is not fulfilling his obligation to pay taxes and is slapping us in the face. Yep. By filing the tax appeal, Mr. Moore is throwing us a giant middle finger. Yep. That's just me being blunt. I call him as I see him, guys. Okay? Mr. Moore is now doing it again on the Helistop. He's throwing us a giant middle finger. Yep. He knew the residents didn't want the Helistop. He came 2 or 3 times. It was rejected. Every time it was rejected. Finally, an opportunity came up to circumvent our laws, our ordinances, the will of our residents. He goes and does it. Is that throwing us a giant middle finger? I think so. I don't know. Referring to political and charitable fundraising events held at the Ridge Golf Course, if Mr. Moore moves forward with the Helistop, defendant Rick Wolf stated that he will not attend a fundraiser at the Ridge. And not only will he not attend, he will not vote for any politician that has a fundraiser at the Ridge, and he won't make a donation to any organization that patronizes the Ridge's golf course. With that statement, I was trying to send a clear message. Mr. Moore has certain political connections at high levels in Hunterdon County. I have supported some of those political candidates, and the message that I was trying to send, because some of those politicians have supported the Helistop in the past, was that if you support this Helistop, You will not get my support, you will not get my vote, and I will do what I can to wrangle the voters of East Amwell to not support you. Defendant Rick Wolf stated he will stick signs on his farm opposing the Helistop, and if anyone else wanted the same signs, he would pay to have them made and hand them out to people, as many people who want them. You know what? It's funny that Mr. Moore and his lawyer complain that we're attacking them for exercising their rights, and I want to exercise my First Amendment right to complain against the Helistop, and I'm a bad guy. Very interesting. Finally, Defendant Rick Wolf said he will do whatever he could to make Mr. Moore's life a living hell. Well, that's not exactly. That's taken out of context. What I did say is I have an economic perspective. He wants to make our life a living hell. I'm going to do what I can to make his life a living hell. Again, I'm very blunt. I don't deny that. According to the Ridge's complaint, based on these statements, I've shown extreme bias and prejudice towards the Ridge. I've engaged in a pattern of reprehensible conduct in an effort to punish the Ridge for engaging in entirely lawful conduct of filing a real estate tax appeal and in filing an application with the New Jersey Department of Transportation for a license to operate a limited-use Helistop. And I've schemed and connived in a multitude of ways to harm the Ridge. The Ridge asserts that my statements, as well as other statements and actions I've taken, whatever they may be, demonstrate a personal bias and prejudice against the Ridge and Joel Moore, which precludes me from fairly and impartially making decisions regarding the Ridge Golf Course in my capacity as mayor, township committee member, and planning board member. In its lawsuit, the Ridge seeks, among other things, to have me prevented from participating in any matter relating to the Ridge, including but not limited to consideration of master plan amendments, zoning ordinance amendments, and any other actions of the township, its departments or agencies, and the board in connection with any matters relating to the Ridge. In other words, you'll build a gigantic wall between me and having anything to do with the Ridge from now to the end of time. Mr. Moore and his lawyers did a spectacular job in this lawsuit of taking select phrases from my statements out of context and presenting them in an unfavorable manner. So what's really going on here? It's beyond dispute that the Ridge knows the residents of East Amwell do not want the Helistop. Indeed, the Ridge tried 2 or 3 times in the past to get approval. Each time there was a significant public opposition to the Helistop, and each time the Ridge application was turned down by our planning board. Last October, the Ridge decided to do an end run around the township and go directly to the NJDOT for a Helistop license. As deputy mayor, I spent many hours looking into the Helistop matter, particularly whether, as numerous residents complained, the Ridge's attempt to get a Helistop is inconsistent with representations it made to East Amwell and its residents in obtaining approval for its golf course. Based on my research, I concluded that, for good reasons, the residents do not want the Helistop. The Ridge is located in an environmentally sensitive area, not at all suited as a takeoff and landing site for helicopters. Riders on the horse trail that runs around the Ridge will be endangered by a Helistop at the Ridge. The Ridge did a bait and switch during the approval process of its golf course in that it knew it would seek a Helistop, but did not disclose that to the township for fear of having its golf course derailed. The Ridge did another bait and switch during the approval process when it emphasized that its golf course would generate significant property tax revenue. The Ridge made several other significant misrepresentations to the township as part of the approval of its golf course, and the Ridge has not been a good neighbor. I also concluded that in 2016, our planning board and our township committee, under very questionable circumstances, amended our golf course ordinance to allow the Ridge to, in effect, go from being a pure golf club to a country club. And I'll discuss this in more detail later. Finally, based on my discussion with Jerry Lightfinger, the NJDOT engineer, I concluded that the Helistop matter had ramifications for East Amwell that go well beyond the Ridge. Based on the foregoing, I decided that as deputy mayor and as a public servant, I have a duty to do at least 2 things. First, do everything in my power to convince NJDOT not to grant the Ridge a helistop license and to stop helistops that serve no public purpose from being located in East Amwell Township. Second, examine more carefully the events that transpired in 2016 when our Planning Board and Township Committee made decisions regarding the Ridge that made no sense to me, seemed flatly contrary to our master plan, and came about under questionable circumstances. In response, Mr. Moore filed a lawsuit. His goal in the lawsuit is quite clear: to keep me from doing my duty. He doesn't like that I'm shining a light on a host of questionable practices and hopes to effectively neutralize me by his lawsuit. Additionally, his lawsuit seeks to deprive me of my First Amendment rights to speak as a resident on important issues pertaining to the township. I hope, and based on the research that I've done thus far, strongly believe that Mr. Moore's lawsuit will fail. Why? Because if it succeeds, I and other elected officials who view themselves as public servants will not be able to do our job. Let me give you a very concrete example, and this is important. As you recall, I started my discussion this evening by summarizing the work I did on the solar field. Here's why I summarize that. Under the theory set forth in Mr. Moore's lawsuit, because I was quite vocal about my willingness to go to war with and was publicly critical of the solar company, I should be barred forever from involvement in any matters involving that solar company. In other words, if I take my role as a public servant seriously and zealously and conscientiously fight for residents that I serve, I will be punished by being barred from any matters involving those whom I impose. Let me give you another example. Let's assume that Pete Miller is not on the township committee. He's a resident. And he speaks out about the Ridge, about the helistop, and then decides he wants to run for township committee, and he wins. And a matter involving the Ridge comes before the township committee. Mr. Moore is going to come running in with his cadre of lawyers and say, Mr. Miller is forever barred from dealing with anything on the Ridge. He was mean to me while he was a member of the public. That can't be the way our law works. And fortunately, there's a New Jersey Supreme Court decision that says it ain't the way our law works. And if it were the way our law works, we'd all be in serious trouble. Mr. Moore's trying to disqualify 2 of the 5 members tonight. If one of the other 3 members happened to say anything at that public hearing, he'd be disqualifying 3 of the 5. We couldn't vote on anything ever having to do with the Ridge. The township committee in this configuration could never do anything having to do with the Ridge. Really? Come on, guys. So the bottom line is that I view Mr. Moore's lawsuit as nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to keep me from doing my duty as a public servant, standing up for the residents. And I'm confident his lawsuit will fail. If you'll bear with me for a few more minutes, I'd like to discuss in a bit of detail some of the questionable circumstances that I referred to regarding some of these ordinances involving the Ridge. I'd like you to pay very, very careful attention to what I'm about to discuss. I'm going to read directly from a host of emails, minutes, etc. I'm not making these words up, they exist. But first, I'd like to talk about a couple of procedural things. In connection with the ordinance that we're considering this evening, as most of you know, the township sent a notice of this public hearing to all the residents in or who live within 200 feet of the Amwell Valley Agricultural District. We sent out 1,102 letters. I know that because Kathy and I stuffed some 1,102 envelopes. Why did we do that? With certain exceptions, the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law requires us to give comprehensive notice regarding any amendment to a zoning ordinance proposing a change to the classification of a zoning district. The law doesn't define the term classification. The courts determined that an amendment to a zoning ordinance requires the comprehensive notice if it has the capacity to fundamentally alter the character or intensity of a zoning district. The leading treatise on the New Jersey municipal land use law, the so-called Cox Treatise, concludes that the comprehensive notice requirement should apply to changes in variables that are within the contemplation of D variances. We believe that an ordinance that in effect allows a golf course in the Amwell Valley Agricultural District, which is very passive and not intense, to convert from a pure golf course to a country club, has the capacity to fundamentally alter the character or intensity of the Amwell Valley Agricultural District. Similarly, we determined that our proposed ordinance, which in effect repeals or takes away that ability, has the capacity to fundamentally alter the character or intensity of the Amwell Valley Agricultural District. Accordingly, we determined that comprehensive notice was required in connection with the proposed amendment. That's why all of you who live in the AVAD or near it got that letter, both by mail and by certified mail. We concluded that under the law we had to send that to everyone. As it turns out, when the 2016 ordinance was proposed and passed by the Township Committee, they never sent out that notice. Therefore, I've come to the conclusion that the 2016 ordinance that gave the Ridge the right to build the cottages, the swimming pool, the tennis courts, and the related facilities is invalid. It's an invalid ordinance. So arguably what we're doing tonight here is unnecessary. We're repealing an invalid ordinance. The ordinance isn't valid. I'm going to take it one step further. The golf course ordinance, which was more intensive than the 2016 ordinance, the township never gave notice, never gave the comprehensive notice. So guess what? The golf course ordinance isn't valid. Now, can we force Mr. Moore to tear down his golf course? No. But the golf course ordinance isn't valid. Now I'd like to talk about some of the questionable practices that I was referring to. As I reviewed the history of the Ridge, the behavior of the Planning Board and the Township Committee perplexed me. In a township that was being run by a group of EADA insiders who wanted to freeze things in time, why would that group agree to allow the Ridge to convert its pure golf course to a country club by approving an ordinance that permitted the Ridge to construct a swimming pool and related facilities, tennis courts and related facilities, and two 250 square foot cottages? Additionally, why would those EADA insiders agree to waive the 250-person limit imposed on the Ridge and push to allow the Ridge to have large-scale events bringing tens of thousands of people into our small township? This made no sense to me. Not only did it seem flatly contrary to our master plan, but it also seemed flatly contrary to the strong anti-development philosophy portrayed, at least in public, by the governing EADA insiders. As I dug into this, I discovered what appear to be some highly questionable practices. One of the first things I uncovered in my research was a memorandum from Joan McGee to the Board of Health from 2008. I paid attention to it because Joan was the planning board administrator during the period the Ridge sought approval for its golf course until sometime after completion of the construction. In the memo, Joan said the following, and I'd like you to listen very carefully. I was very surprised to learn that the Ridge Golf Course is seeking to build a residential housing, allegedly for visitors, and again trying to have a helicopter landing pad on its premises between Wartsville and Backbrook Roads. When the Ridge tried several years ago to have a helicopter landing pad, the then zoning officer stated this was not a permitted use and advised the Ridge to go to the zoning board to get a D variance under the municipal land use law. All D variance requests must go to the zoning board. A D variance is required if a use of the property is not allowed in the applicable zoning district. Notwithstanding this clear pronouncement, the Ridge came to the planning board pursuant to a behind-the-scenes deal with certain members of the planning board. They had an agreement that the heliport would be approved, It was only because of vehement public opposition that certain planning board members changed their mind and disallowed a heliport. Now, not only is the Ridge seeking a heliport, it is also seeking to build housing allegedly for overnight visitors. The Amwell Valley ordinance pertaining to golf courses specifically makes this use prohibited. Once again, a de-use variance would be necessary before the zoning board. However, once again, the Ridge has approached the planning board instead of the zoning board. After original inception of the Ridge's golf course site plan, certain planning board members met and corresponded with the applicant without notice to the public or other board members and contrary to the board attorney's advice. If current requests go through, it appears that proper procedures once again will not be followed. In late 2018, there was also an email from Don Riley, the then chair of our planning board, to Martin Allen, the township's lawyer in the property tax appeal by the Ridge. That email said the following, and I want you to listen very carefully. With respect to the 2016 amendment to the 1999 ordinance, the change to allow swimming pools, tennis courts, and lodging, this change was at Joel's request. Joel said in front of me on more than one occasion that he would never build the swimming pool or tennis courts, since as long as he owned the Ridge, it would be a golf course and not a country club. He may have made similar statements during the 1999 ordinance and the 2000 preliminary approval hearings, but as I stated, I was not there. His reason for asking for these amenities was to increase the potential value when the Ridge was sold, and that this would give the new owners options in the future. After reading this, I thought to myself, why is East Amwell amending its ordinance against the will of most of the residents who spoke at the hearings solely to enable Joel Moore to quote-unquote increase the potential value of the Ridge when it's sold? That didn't seem like a proper basis for such ordinance amendment, nor did it make any sense to me generally. It also appeared that the amendments were the result of backroom dealings between Don Riley and Mr. Moore that, best I can tell, were not discussed or even disclosed to the residents. The September 9th, 2015 Planning Board minutes. Again, I'd like you to listen very carefully. At the September 9th, 2015 meeting, the Planning Board was discussing amending the golf course ordinance to allow the Ridge to construct the tennis courts, a swimming pool, and 2 cottages. In the course of that discussion, the minutes state the following. He, Mr. Moore's lawyer, reminded the board that this came about because the township came to the Ridge and asked what they could do to make the Ridge a secure and economically viable business in this township. I thought to myself, why are these EADA insiders who are governing East Amwell, doing this? Best I can tell, they weren't making similar inquiries of our farmers or any other businesses in East Amwell. They weren't asking our farmers what the township could do to improve their business. They weren't asking other businesses what they could do to improve their business, but yet they all went to the Ridge and said, what can we do to improve your business? And bear in mind, at the same time, members of the EADA insiders were falling all over themselves to ensure the profitability of the Ridge. The Ridge was challenging in court its property tax assessment. Now I'm going to talk about a statement Mr. Moore himself made. Speaking of the Ridge's property tax challenge, in an expert report that Mr. Moore prepared and signed, presumably under penalties of perjury, Mr. Moore said the following. The Ridge differs from other high-end clubs on the grounds that other high-end clubs offer additional amenities facilities that the Ridge was not permitted to have by the East Amwell Land Management Ordinance during its design and construction phase, which subsequently led the Ridge being precluded from adding these additional amenities/facilities during the relevant time periods in this matter. The additional amenities facilities include, among other things, the ability to have banquet, pool, and tennis facilities. Naturally, these additional amenities facilities enable other clubs to generate revenues that the Ridge simply cannot generate. Moreover, and listen very carefully, having been denied the opportunity to incorporate these additional amenities facilities into the design and construction phase, it may be economically and physically infeasible to justify construction of said amenities and facilities even if they were permitted now. So Mr. Moore is saying under penalties of perjury, even if he were allowed to build the swimming pool and tennis courts, it may be economically and physically infeasible. I found this intriguing for two reasons. First, Mr. Moore seems to be implying that, were it not for the restrictions in our original golf course ordinance, he would have included during the construction of his club, among other things, banquet pool and tennis facilities. But yet this is flatly inconsistent with the numerous statements Mr. Moore made to the township and his residents during the approval process of his golf course and in the past few years in magazine articles. Indeed, an article that appears on the Ridge's own website today says, "It seems the time was ripe to build a true golf-only club in central New Jersey, a place where purists could go to concentrate on golf alone, with no pool, no tennis, and no residential component to distract them from their main focus, and to be designed to the highest standards possible for the people in the area." Second, Mr. Moore was telling the court in the property tax case, presumably under penalties of perjury, that even if he's allowed by East Amwell to construct these amenities, having been denied the opportunity to incorporate these amenities facilities into the design and construction phase, it may be economically and physically infeasible to justify the construction of said amenities and facilities even if they are permitted now. This seems flatly contrary to Mr. Moore's statement to Mr. Riley and to the township that allowing him to construct these facilities will increase the value of the golf course. Mr. Moore seems to be speaking with a forked tongue. Now I'd like to read an email from Mr. Moore to Don Riley and Fred Gardner. In the email to Don Riley, chair of our planning board, and Fred Gardner regarding the special events ordinance that the Ridge was requesting, Mr. Moore said the following: "The reason why I'm reaching out to both of you is not only out of frustration, but from the standpoint of fair play. The Ridge has proven to be a very good neighbor without problems or instances to the township or any of its neighbors. Over the years, whenever a request was made by the Ridge, we have gone through the proper protocols and process at considerable expense to the Ridge, and I feel that after going through the public meeting process and working with the planning board over months of deliberation and expert testimony, again at considerable cost to the Ridge, it should not end by a simple recommendation by the planning board to the township committee. Politics and personal agendas should never play a role, and that the township should be an advocate and supporter of the Ridge. I strongly feel, especially in a small township such as East Amwell, that the township, and more specifically the governing body that the Ridge has always dealt with, the planning board, should be more proactive in terms of following up with their recommendations to the township committee. My final comment pertains to the comment made by former mayor when we had one of the former mayor when we had one of the informal meetings at the Ridge last year. I know Don was at that meeting, and I believe Fred was as well. At that meeting, the new mayor acknowledged that in 2016, one of the former members of the township committee recommended to the other members of the township committee that until the Ridge's property tax appeal is resolved, they should not address the special events permit matter. At that meeting at the Ridge, I was assured by the new mayor that would not be the case in 2017. But again, no action on the planning board recommendation. So in 2016, Mr. Matthews spoke out about trying to give the Ridge a special events ordinance when there was a property tax appeal going on. As soon as Mr. Matthews left at the township committee at the end of 2016, in 2017, the new mayor is out there trying to strike a deal with Mr. Moore about this special events ordinance. Now I'm going to recount for you Don Riley's recollection of that meeting, the meeting I just referred to, among Don, Mr. Moore, and our new mayor, then new mayor, Charlie Van Horn.
And the township attorney.
I'm sorry?
And the township attorney and myself.
And I do recall when the meeting that Charlie Van Horn and I had with Mr. Moore at the clubhouse, and I believe it was 2 years ago. I believe it was 2 years ago where I was introducing Mr. Van Horn to Mr. Moore so Joel could explain why it was so important for the special events ordinance. At the end of the conversation, Joel wanted to discuss the tax appeal with Charlie Van Horn and also invited me to sit in on it, which I said no, I'm not sitting in on it. I had nothing to do with it. I left the conference room and waited out in the lobby, somewhere until they were done. I didn't discuss with Mr. Van Horn anything that he and Mr. Moore discussed with respect to this. I'm just aware of that conversation that they had, and I'm not even aware. I'm only aware that there was that issue that was brought up. I have no idea what was discussed. So I just want to, that was what I recollect, and I wanted to share that with Mr. Martin since I had not shared it with anybody. At the same deposition, Don said, and I quote, "I've met with Joel at the Ridge a number of times for a number of matters." He also said that I told Mr. Moore that I thought he was being treated unfairly, essentially because the special events ordinance wasn't being moved forward as recommended by the planning board. Don also stated that in his deposition, he also stated that he had been a member of several golf clubs, most recently Stanton Ridge, to which Don paid an annual membership fee of somewhere around $10,000 and an initiation fee of $15,000. So our planning board chair, who was pushing through these various amendments for the Ridge, had been a member of several golf clubs, including most recently one where he was paying $10,000 a year for a membership fee and $15,000 as an initiation fee. I have a couple more points that I want to make, and then I'm going to get into what's really going on here. Money. Let's talk about money. In a 2004 letter, David Gordon, Joel's lawyer, was complaining to Kurt Hoffman, the then mayor of East Amwell, about, among other things, not being issued a certificate of occupancy for the clubhouse. In that letter, Mr. Gordon references as a reason why the Ridge should be treated in, I quote, "a more personal and less arbitrary manner," the generous financial support which the Ridge has given to local township organizations such as the First Aid Squad, the Fire Department, and the Little League. As an experienced lawyer, Mr. Gordon undoubtedly knows that you cannot buy a permit by providing generous financial support to certain organizations. Additionally, Mr. Gordon's letter, which seems quite carefully worded, said "such as," leading me to believe that Mr. Moore has provided generous financial support to organizations other than those listed in Mr. Gordon's letter. In a 2003 memorandum from Mr. Moore to our then township clerk, Terry Stahl, intended for the township committee, Mr. Moore said that if the township agrees to certain requests, including granting certain permits, and I quote, "The Ridge confirms its willingness to consider allowing an annual fundraising event for the benefit of the township, subject to the Ridge having no objection to the purpose for which the proceeds will be used. We estimate that such an annual fundraiser could raise as much as $50,000 per event." The words confirms its willingness seems to imply that Mr. Moore was responding to a request from one or more persons on the township committee regarding the township having a fundraiser at the Ridge. So now, and I'm getting near the end here, I'm going to tell you what I think is really happening. 1998, East Amwell is deeply in debt, somewhere between $8.5 and $10 million. We're near our legal limit, mainly because we were spending a lot of money to put farms into preservation. Our tax rate was high. Best I could tell, it was higher than it is today. Actually, about 1.5 times what it is today. The EADA insiders who were running the town at the time were in a panic. In 1999, they put in place a special farmland preservation tax on the residents. They told the residents repeatedly that the revenue from the tax would be utilized solely for farmland preservation. They weren't telling the truth. Instead, much of that revenue from the tax was used for other purposes. It was a backdoor way of increasing the tax on the residents in an effort to control a budget that was spiraling out of control. There was a sizable block of land that was not in preservation, and the owner was threatening to develop it or sell it to a developer. Mr. Moore comes to the EADA insiders in late 1998 with a proposal. He'll buy that block of land and build a golf course, but not a regular golf course. Rather, a golf course for purists. Only golf, no other amenities like pools, tennis courts, or housing. The EADA insiders, without really thinking it through, jumped at the proposal. They saw it as an opportunity to keep 300 acres from being developed into houses and at the same time generate significant property tax revenue. Their desire to avoid development was so strong that they'd sell their souls to the devil to avoid having the 300 acres turn into a housing development with 30 to 40 houses. They were on a mission and nothing was going to stop them. Not the residents, not the township's Board of Health, not even complying with New Jersey's municipal land use law. And Mr. Moore egged them on with all sorts of promises. They jammed the golf course down the residents' throats. Did money in some fashion change hands? I can't say for sure, but the letter from Mr. Gordon and the memo from Mr. Moore, both of which I quoted from earlier, certainly raised the specter of buying approvals. In 2001, while the golf course is under construction, Don Riley, apparently an avid golfer, becomes a member of the planning board. I believe Don was also a member of the township committee. As the Ridge went through the design and construction process, the EADA insiders, for the most part, bent over backwards for Mr. Moore and basically neutralized anyone who complained. In 2005, the Ridge decides that it wants a helistop so it could add to its marketing materials that members could fly into and out of the Ridge by helicopter. Mr. Riley and the rest of the planning board were on the cusp of approving that helistop. However, the public outcry was so great that Mr. Riley at the last minute shifted course and voted no. The final vote was 4-2 against the helistop. In 2015, the Ridge is challenging his property tax assessment. The EADA insiders are concerned because they believe they need the Ridge's property tax to help fund their bloated budget. On several occasions, Mr. Riley, sometimes alone and sometimes with other EADA insiders, meets with Mr. Moore to inquire what the township can do to increase the value of the Ridge. Mr. Moore asked for the right to build a swimming pool and related facilities, tennis courts and related facilities, and 250 square foot cottages. He asked the planning board to waive the 250-person limit on attendance at the Ridge and get the township committee to enact a special events ordinance that would allow Mr. Moore to have large-scale events at the Ridge. Against the wishes of the majority of the residents who spoke on the issues, and even against wishes of some of his own EADA colleagues, Mr. Riley gets Mr. Moore what he asked for, with one exception. Mr. Riley is unable to get the township committee to enact the special events ordinance. I suspect it's because in 2017 it was a critical election for the EADA. The EADA held a slim 3-2 majority on the township committee, and Mr. Matthews and Mr. Miller, both very strong candidates, were challenging the then EADA mayor and deputy mayor in the 2017 election. The EADA knew the residents would strongly oppose a special events ordinance for the Ridge, and the EADA did not want to fight that battle in a critical election year. That's why Mayor Van Horn was not moving forward with the special events ordinance in 2017, notwithstanding that behind closed doors he indicated to Mr. Moore that he would. Mr. Moore was quite upset that he did not get his special events ordinance. As a last-ditch effort to get the township committee to enact the ordinance, Mr. Moore applied directly to the NJDOT for a helistop license. He knew the residents were strongly against the helistop, and he figured that he could trade with the township committee the helistop for the special events ordinance. Well, that failed miserably as well. So, a few thoughts in no particular order. First, I'm sure Mr. Moore and the EADA insiders will state that the numerous closed-door meetings that the EADA insiders had with Mr. Moore were both innocent and proper. However, if that's the case, then why didn't the EADA insiders discuss these meetings at the Planning Board and the Township Committee meetings? In fact, one meeting, the meeting among Mr. Moore, Charlie Van Horn, and Don Riley that took place during the Ridge's property tax appeal was so improper that Don Riley refused to stay for the meeting. Charlie opted to meet one-on-one with Mr. Moore to discuss the property tax appeal. At the same time, Charlie and Don were discussing the special events ordinance with Mr. Moore. It appears that the sole purpose for the 2016 amendments, and this is really critical, was to increase the value of the Ridge and thus increase the amount of the property tax paid by the Ridge. As far as I know, under New Jersey municipal land use law, that's not a valid purpose for the 2016 amendments. This is another reason why I believe the 2016 amendments are invalid. To add insult to injury, in 2018, Mr. Moore stabbed the EADA in the back by effectively saying in his expert report that the amenities that were the subject of the 2016 amendments added no value to his golf course. Did Don Riley ever disclose at any of the hearings that he's an avid golfer, paying $10,000 per year, plus a $15,000 initiation fee for a golf club membership? I've seen no evidence of that in any of the minutes. Would that disqualify him? I suspect the answer is no. Is that something that might bear on his objectivity and thus influence the weight the residents might give to the views of the planning board chair? I would have thought the answer is yes. So what prompted me to comb through Don Riley's deposition and Mr. Moore's expert report? Well, believe it or not, it was Les Hamilton and David Wong Iverson. They filed an extensive Oprah request for basically all the materials pertaining to the Ridge's tax appeal. Given that they were up to their respective ears in these Ridge matters, I figured that Les and David were reviewing these materials because they were concerned that the materials might contain buried bodies. To some degree, they were right. By the way, how do I know about the Oprah request? Because it's cost this township over $1,000 in legal fees complying with it. So here is my conclusion. Where does all of this leave us? First, Mr. Moore, through his lawsuit, is trying to stop me from doing my duty as a public servant. Indeed, if Mr. Moore is successful in his lawsuit, it will have a chilling effect on all elected officials. Does he really believe he's going to succeed? I doubt it. So why is he doing this? Intimidation. To try to turn public opinion against me through hyperbole in his lawsuit, knowing I'm running for re-election this year, perhaps in collaboration for the VIP. Any doubt, take a look at the article on the lawsuit in the June edition of the VIP. Second, I believe the original golf course ordinance is invalid because the Township Committee did not give the residents the notice required under New Jersey municipal land use law. I suspect it's too late to do anything about that. Third, I believe the 2016 amendment that granted the Ridge the right to build the tennis courts, a swimming pool, and 250 square foot cottage is invalid for at least two reasons. The Township Committee did not give the residents the required notice. Additionally, the ordinance was not enacted for a purpose that is recognized as valid under New Jersey municipal land use law. Rather, the ordinance was enacted to increase the value of the Ridge and thus increase the property taxes the township receives from the Ridge. That's not a valid purpose for the ordinance. Jersey's law is quite clear on that. Finally, the entire process from the beginning in 1998 through 2017 has at the very least a very dark cloud hanging over it. Closed-door meetings, apparently many in number, backroom deals, undisclosed personal interest, improper purposes for enacting ordinance, perhaps influenced by donations. In conclusion, the material I discussed this evening is the result of many hours of research. Initially, I felt it was important to do this research so that I could do the best job possible to try to convince the NJDOT not to grant the helistop license to the Ridge. As I got into the research, however, I realized that the ridge was also important because it would illustrate what happens when elected officials put their interests ahead of the interests of the people they serve and legislate under the cover of darkness. There's an old saying, those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it. I learned a lot from my trek into the history of the ridge. Thank you. I'm starting to lose my voice, and I'm sorry I took up so much time, but I felt that it was important for the residents to understand why I've been doing what I've been doing. And until the court tells me that I can no longer do what I've been doing, I'm going to continue to fight for what I believe is right. And I'm going to fight as hard as I possibly can. So with that, do I have a motion to
Adopt.
I'm sorry, I need my, do I have an motion to adopt ordinance 19-10?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion?
What more could be said?
Roll call?
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes.
Mr. Sobieski?
Yes.
And Mr. Ostrander?
Yes.
The adoption notice will be published in the June 20th, 2019 issue of the Hunter County Democrat.
I'd like to thank all you for turning out tonight, those who expressed opinions in support and those who expressed opinions against. Thank you. We have no in.
5-minute break.
You want to take a 5-minute break?
Please.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute break. We will resume momentarily. We're going back on the record. We have no ordinances to introduce, no special committee reports, unfinished business. The visiting nurse flu clinic update.
So I called our insurance company. They suggested we had the visiting nurse put us on their liability insurance in case someone falls or not. What's up? Visiting nurse stated they cannot do that. So it's their liability insurance will cover whatever they conduct shot-wise. But if someone falls here, hurts themselves, that would go under our insurance.
Look, I think basically the way this works is if the visiting nurses screw up, their insurance covers it. They take an empty needle and they inject somebody. It happened to my dad in the Army, which is why my dad won't get needles anymore. It's not you get injected with air, you can die. Their liability insurance will cover it. If somebody gets hurt coming to and from, they fall out front, our insurance covers it. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure, did our insurance tell you that they're okay with this happening?
They didn't. He said he would suggest us being on their liability insurance.
All right, before we, go ahead.
I would just say that if they're not going to add us as an additional insured, that our joint insurance fund might deny us coverage if anything goes wrong.
That's why I don't want
think that's
to
what he
resolve
was-
this
yeah.
tonight. I want to have a conversation myself with the insurance company. I want something from the insurance company telling us that if we move forward with this, our only risk is on the slip and fall.
Okay.
I'll talk to them. I'll set something
Okay.
up and you and I can talk to
Sure.
them together. So I think for now, we just,
Risk is on the supplemental, and that they cover that.
right.
What I don't want them to do is not cover that.
No, I want to make sure that we're
Because what he
covered.
said, he's like, we're not the ones inviting them here. The visiting nurse are inviting them here. So the liability should be put on them. And that's why he asked for us to be put on their liability insurance.
Well, look, we're offering a service to the residents.
Right.
We are inviting them to come to give the flu shots. I need to understand what happens. I'm not worried about the slip and fall. I'm worried about something goes wrong. Somebody has a bad reaction. A needle is given incorrectly. I don't want us to be subject to some massive lawsuit. So I'll talk about it. Resolution to approve the summer playground directors. Kevin, Krista, you guys want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I mean, we've actually made the decision to move ahead with a supervising director and 3, I guess we still call them directors. So there's now going to be a staff of 4 that will actually manage the students. We have those listed, so they've all agreed and everybody's filled out the appropriate applications, et cetera. There will also be an alternate if any of those go down. We'll have another person that can come in, and we can also escalate an additional person depending on how many attendees or enrollees we actually get, because last year it was down to somewhere in the 40s. So I think we can accommodate it. So we're trying to manage the staff cost very carefully. Tara Zengel is actually managing, she's the supervising director. So all the people that we've hired had affiliation with the school. They're either teachers or substitute teachers. They're active there. So and it's the same group that we pretty much have had for the last few years. So it's a very experienced team. So we're ready to move forward on that, and hopefully we have good enrollment.
We also had a recommendation to student volunteers.
Good,
So-
which we did last year as well.
Okay, so I had a
Yeah.
mother call this
Okay.
week, and I put her in touch
Okay.
with Tira, so.
So still fill out the CFL, and then we can give them some sort of a documentation on the back end of it for their participation, because that's always appreciated. And one day they may be a director as well. That's the hope. And the kids relate to that, having another older kid there sometimes. So that's helpful. Good. Glad. That's where we stand.
So we need a resolution to approve the summer playground
We need a
directors.
motion.
A motion to approve.
I'll move. Oh, good, Pete.
I'll move, and he can second.
Okay.
I second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the third item under unfinished business, I talked about this last meeting. The NJDOT wants to replace the bridge on 179 over the Back Brook. They want to try to get some federal funding. In order to get federal funding, the feds want to know that the municipality that's impacted, East Amwell, is not against the bridge, that we're okay with replacing the bridge. So NJDOT,
Now they want it, right?
yes. Well, they're going to have there's going to be a public hearing in July where the residents of East Amwell can come and get information and share their views. This resolution tonight isn't the end of it's just, if it does move forward, in order for New Jersey to get the federal funding, they need a resolution from East Amwell saying, we're okay with this. I asked them what happens if we don't give the resolution. If we don't give the resolution, then the bridge stays the way it is till it collapses. So it doesn't seem to me like we have a lot of choice here. So I just need I need a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Is this the turtle tunnel?
This is the turtle tunnel. Yes,
As long as that's included.
Yeah,
it is.
all about the turtles, yeah.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. New business. The Clausen Park fees. I'm sorry?
Go ahead, I'll add to it when you're done.
To,
Clausen Park fees.
okay. The Clausen Park fees, a question arose well, let me step back. As you recall, we amended our ordinance to charge a $100 fee to use Clausen Park. That was to cover our costs, because we have setup costs and we have cleanup costs. The $100 may not even cover our costs, but at least it gets us a good way there. Because we have to set up, we have to clean up the restrooms, etc. A question arose whether we should exempt not-for-profits from the fee. Now, my reaction to that was no, they should pay the same fee, and in part it's because of something that Tim mentioned to me that came up when he was on the township committee his first time, which is the township was making donations to various not-for-profits. And Tim thought that was inappropriate, that we shouldn't be taking taxpayer money and donating it to charities. Taxpayers should decide where they want their money to go, not East Amwell.
That's right. That's, yeah.
To me, if you exempt not-for-profits from the fee, you're effectively doing that. If it costs us, let's assume we break even and it costs us $100, every time we waive it, we're in effect making a $100 donation. So because Tim's original comment to me, which was from a couple years ago, seemed perfectly logical, my reaction was, we should just charge everybody the fee. And if a particular not-for-profit, can't afford it, and I like the not-for-profit, I'll pay it for them, okay? But I wanted to bring this to the committee because I didn't want to make this decision myself. I thought this was a committee decision, not a mayor decision.
I still stand by that position.
I agree with the sentiment, just based on the research I did with the peddler's ordinance, which we're going to get to next month, just so you guys wait. What I'm worried about with the nonprofit thing is if we're charging, let's say, a religious organization to use what is the public sphere, does that raise First Amendment concerns?
I mean, I would have thought since we're charging everybody,
Yeah.
we're not treating them any differently than anybody else.
Yeah, but like it's a public space, you know what I mean? It's like First Amendment, right? Like you're on public property. You should, I mean, if they're using it for an event, I guess it's not really speech.
Depends on if it's a reasonable imposition or not, you know?
Yeah.
But there's also separation of church and state. I mean, you can't favor.
Yeah, but we can't like.
If it's reasonable and you treat everybody the same, it minimizes the
Well,
concerns.
here's
they're
the
valid
thing.
concerns.
The reason I bring that up is the Watchtower case with the peddler's ordinance. They said that, so the town in that case was charging everybody who wanted to, peddlers.
But hang on, Chris, the Watchtower case was a First Amendment case.
Yeah, that's why I'm
It
worried
was,
about this being a First
just so you guys know,
Yeah.
a township in Ohio enacted an ordinance that required anybody who wanted to go door to door for any reason had to come in and get a license and pay a fee. And the Supreme Court said that imposing that burden, and it wasn't just the fee, it was even getting the license, was an unreasonable restraint on your First Amendment rights.
Exactly. So
The example they gave is, let's assume somebody sees something on TV that they find outrageous and they want to go start knocking on their neighbors' doors and ask the neighbors what they think. You have to go and get a license before you could do that? The court says, no. That's a First Amendment issue. I don't see any First Amendment issue here. We're not restricting anybody's right to speak. All we're saying is it costs us money for you to come in and use Clausen Park. We just want to cover our costs. We're charging everybody $100.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the question is, do you have a right to use the park for
If
whatever
you want to
want?
defer this a
Right.
month, Chris, and research it, I'm okay with that. I don't need anything urgent. I mean, I'm happy to let it go a month if you want to go off and do the research.
Honestly, just because I'm trying to stay sharp, I might look into it just to be safe.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
I'm
You guys
okay
cool
with that.
I don't want to.
I'm okay.
The only thing I would add is, we restrict the park based on hours. So, we have restrictions on a park, so.
Yeah. I mean, everything's, subject to reasonability, right? So.
Look, I appreciate the youth of, the
See, this is the thing.
exuberance
I'm
of
in law school. We ask
a
these
young law
questions all the
student.
time.
I'm
Yeah.
okay putting it off a month.
All right.
So there was also discussion about the deposit. Even though we don't typically cash the check, we should be putting that in an escrow account.
I thought we decided to cash the checks every time.
Supposedly they're just holding them. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people are not reserving the park and just using it, which is causing a lot more trash and things to show up at the park.
I'm sorry, we went through this, and I know we said we're gonna cash the checks and then we'd reimburse.
From my understanding, they're not being cashed. They're
Well,
being held.
Who raised with you that we should cash them and put them in an escrow? Margaret?
Me.
And you raised that why?
Because you shouldn't be holding checks. It's just like, if you receive a check in, you have to put it somewhere. You can't just hold a check.
Well, look, I'm kind of agnostic on this. Whatever is right, I don't care whether we hold the check or cash it. If we believe we should cash it, that's fine.
But my thing is a lot of people aren't gonna wanna put $400 down to reserve a park.
Yeah, it's like a
So if we could
but then
minimize the fee.
But remember, the $400 deposit is
I
in case something gets damaged.
I understand.
If we don't ask for a deposit and something gets damaged, then what do? We have to sue. We're not going to sue because the cost to sue will be more than we're going to recover, which means we eat the damage. So I think we have to make a fundamental decision. Do we want just the $100 fee and not a deposit, or do we want to stay where we are and get the
It's gonna
$400
be more work
deposit?
with the deposit for Margaret, on Margaret's end.
So what I'm hearing though is a different question. It's should we cash the check? Yes, we should collect a security. That's my position. But as to why or why not we're
I don't
cashing
know.
a
Yeah, I
check,
don't-
isn't that a Margaret should be able to answer that question, no?
Look, the problem is I think if you cash the check, then don't we need a PO to get the money out?
We'll have to do a resolution, come to the
Right.
township committee.
Yeah,
Right.
reimbursement
Oh,
resolution,
that's-
that's all,
It's
just
just,
like we
it's
reimburse.
almost like for the
Right.
driveway bonds. and-
Right, it's exactly what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's wrong with that?
Nothing other than the first time I did it, for when I was building my house and I gave one of those bonds, and then we got inspected, we were fine, and I went to get my $2,500 back. I got this form.
You have
A
to,
PO.
well, you have to sign a PO. Margaret
Right,
makes
I'm like,
you a
why am I
to
getting a
sign.
PO? I want my money back. Why am I getting I'm not ordering anything, I want my money back.
It's
And
the
then somebody
sign.
said, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, you sign a PO to get your money.
I have to
back,
sign a
and then it
PO to
goes
get
to
my
a
money
resolution.
back.
Well, that's a
Weird.
different issue.
That's really weird.
I don't think that's a different issue.
That's a process.
Yeah, that
That's how
shouldn't
you-
be, that shouldn't drive whether we do this or not.
But I think there are two questions. One, do we want the $400 deposit? If the answer is yes, then two, do we want to cash the check? So let's take number one. Do we want to continue to take the $400 deposit?
Yes.
Yes, I don't see why not.
Okay. Then question number two, do we cash the check? Krista, I leave that to you and Margaret.
Okay.
Whatever you guys want to do, whatever you guys think is right,
If there's latitude to do either legally, then
do whatever's
do
easiest
what's easiest.
for you and for the residents.
Procedural.
Right. Okay, and then on the $100, we'll defer that for a month and let you do your thing, because I'm okay, there's not urgency on that. We're not, it's not like we have an inflow of not-for-profits.
Well, we actually do. So we have pending applications.
How many?
There's like 3 of them. You were.
Well, no, she already paid.
Yeah.
We already got her
There's
money.
two or three more.
I did offer to pay, though, I did offer to pay for the school.
There's 2 or 3 more
Well,
pending.
then I suggest
So-
we continue.
We collect it, and if we decide we don't want it, we'll give it back.
Well, she didn't collect it because of the supposedly
I emailed and said collect it. Who, Pam?
that she didn't collect it, and then she, I guess, talked to you and you said collect it. So
All right,
she's
let's do it this way, Krista, we're gonna collect.
because there's a resolution that,
I saw that.
but that's voided because it's not an ordinance.
Let's do this. Let's collect it. And if we decide next month we're not,
Then we can refund
we can
it.
refund it. Okay. All right. The resignation of Mark Gunn from Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, I have 2, I have animal
Wait.
control chip seal.
Ooh, Krista, I didn't get the whole.
What is that?
Mine doesn't have it, you see? Okay, all right, all right.
No, it's not on his copy. I don't know.
All right.
Oh, I missed it on my
Yeah,
copy.
Okay. All right, sorry. I'm glad you
That's
caught
my
that,
fault.
because
Well,
this
I
is
think
important.
The whole agenda's been off a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
That's my fault. He's got my agenda.
I have her agenda. All right, so, animal control officer. I'm gonna make a long story short. People don't seem to be happy with St. Oh, I have 19 pages on it, actually. Hang on.
Can you make it one?
People are not happy with St. Hubert's. And we got a proposal from Carolyn Murphy. Carolyn came in here some time ago and spoke. And we thought she was good. And the reason that we didn't hire her because there were some issues with her contract.
Yeah, I vaguely remember this from.
The fee schedule, et cetera. Well, she's worked that out, and I had a long conversation with her about a week and a half ago. Is her contract well drafted? No, but she's not a big business. We're gonna save some money. We're gonna save a few $100s going with her. I asked Krista to poll the masses, to talk to other municipalities that have been using her. Krista sent me a little write-up. The recommendations were glowing.
Yep.
A couple of residents chimed in, glowing references. I talked to her for about 45 minutes. and asked a lot of questions and was very, very happy with the answers. I think we ought to send the termination notice to St. Hubert's. We can terminate, I believe, on 60 days' notice. And the date their contract ends, we start with Carolyn.
There's a check in the bills of the evening for them.
For St. Hubert's?
Yes.
But we
Quarterly
pay them
check.
by the quarter?
Yeah, so I don't know if it's in arrears or forward-looking, but
All right, let's hold that check until we figure out whether it's in arrears or forward. And then let's plan on sending them the termination notice.
yeah, let's make it
So should we move the resolution, or?
That's what I want to do. I
Okay.
just want to,
I already have a resolution done. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, can I have a motion to approve allowing me to sign the contract with Carolyn?
So moved.
Second.
This one says to terminate. Yeah, it's one,
Yep.
right?
Oh, yeah.
And they-
It's all in one, to
It's all in
terminate
one? I
St.
didn't finish
Hubert's
reading it,
and
okay.
to,
Okay, so this is the one that we're
Yes,
moving and
to
approving.
terminate St. Hubert's and allow me to enter into a contract with
with
Carolyn.
It's Advanced Control Services, I think.
Ideally without any overlap, so that when theirs ends, hers starts.
Okay.
Aye.
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 Aye. That's
Okay.
good, everything.
All in favor? Everybody in favor?
That was all in
Okay.
favor.
Okay. All right.
What's next?
Chip seal bid with West Amwell Township. Jason Silverthorne suggested that we might save money if we pooled our chip seal with West Amwell's. They're doing a chip seal program, we're doing a chip seal program. If we put the two together, he believes we could save money. Our engineer, Bill Burr, agrees. There are also advantages to going out with a much larger proposal. We're likely to get more bidders. So I can't see any downside, but I didn't want to make this decision on my own either. I wanted to bring it to the township committee. I don't know that we need a formal resolution, do we, Krista? I mean, I don't care, but if we do,
I don't have a resolution.
You guys
but I
okay?
think it's just a consensus of whether
my
we,
only concern, which I raised with Rick, is
But then-
will this slow us down? Because we want to get this work done,
Yeah.
out to bid and done this year. And our window is up to what, October?
yeah, Bill told me no.
Yeah, so as long as it
Bill
doesn't
said it
slow
will
us down.
not slow us down.
I'm okay.
West Amwell's cool with it?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
Yep.
West Amwell is on board.
Yep.
They were just waiting for us to say we're okay.
And there's economies of scale, and there's also, Bill Burr's their engineer, so
Oh, perfect.
we'll
It all
share
works
the
out.
engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No brainer.
This to me seems like a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, if we could save a few $1,000s, it's more towards next year's chip seal, so.
Exactly.
Okay, next is the resignation of Mark Gunn. Can I have a motion to accept his resignation with regrets?
So moved.
Okay.
Put
Resign,
on it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Resignation of Rosemarie Georgette from the Parks and Recreation Committee. She's not leaving us.
No.
She's just dropping this because
Reallocating.
it's just too much for her. So can I have a motion to approve, accept her resignation with regrets?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The next is, we have a shared service right now with the school, with the East Amwell School, where we share their computer IT person. That has not been working well for us. And we're spending more money than we think we should, because everything seems to be an extra, an add-on. And we're not particularly happy with the service. Krista has worked with Princeton Computer Support and has been very happy. They've offered us a contract which would be $225 a month. We are trying to automate this township. We're going to become more reliant on our computers. We have to keep them up and running.
Not only that, I was hit with spam today.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean,
So everybody got an email?
we're kind of out there in no man's land. We need somebody, so I'd like to get, should we adopt a resolution for this? Can I get a motion to adopt a resolution to enter into a monthly agreement with Princeton Computer Support at the $225 a month?
So moved.
Second. Question though, how does that stack up to what we're paying right now for the guy from East Amwell?
We're not paying anything. It's part of the shared service. We
Oh,
do
it's
their
part of the shared
plowing.
Okay.
They clean our restrooms and give us a certain amount of computer time.
We get nothing.
And it's
really.
just.
So we're getting nothing.
Okay.
We've got it in the budget is the point.
Okay.
Well, we're going to have to find it in the budget, I think, but Margaret will find it. Which brings me to just a point, not the point that I'm bringing to
She
you.
said she can cover this,
Right.
this.
You can, okay.
Yes.
But there's one other point which I'll probably be bringing to the township committee at some point. Our computers are old, and they're not working right. You can't keep a computer more than 4 or 5 years.
That's a Windows XP.
Yeah, ours is 10, I believe. Okay.
Yeah.
So
My computer died.
we need new computers, and we need to have a program where we get new computers every 4 or 5 years. So I think we need to build something into the budget that gets us new computers here, either buy or some leasing arrangement. At my firm, we used to buy. We stopped that years ago. We do a leasing arrangement. It wound up saving us money. So Krista will look into what's most cost effective.
Okay.
And we're not talking about buying fancy computers, but we need functional computers.
Yeah, something.
We also need a laptop so that Krista can take that laptop with her because she works from home a lot. So ideally, I'd like to have a port where she can put the laptop here, work off her screens, take it home, work off her screens at home. So I just want to let you know that this is where I think we ought to go, and we're not approving anything today, but I'd like Krista to start exploring what our alternatives are, come back to us, and then we do something. We okay with that?
Yeah. We
I
need
just have one
computers from this
question on this.
decade.
Does this firm have municipal experience? Okay.
Did we do an all in favor on this? We did?
Oh, I don't know.
On the
I
computer
don't think we
support,
did.
on the Princeton computer?
We have a
No.
motion and
Just
a
looking
second.
into it.
Yeah, we have the motion and the second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Another thing which we're not bringing to you now, just as other than as a heads up, we got a proposal for a phone system upgrade that would result in us paying, what was it, about as much as we're paying now?
We would, with the proposal, we would save $50
A month or a year?
a month.
Oh, okay.
And that would be, in order to pay off the system, it would take us 3.5 years, the new system,
Okay.
at the quote as it is now.
But we don't have this in the budget.
No,
So this is going to have to be a
this will
next year
have to
thing.
wait till next year.
But our phone system
It's
is also
20 years
failing.
old. Both our computers and our phone systems are 20 years old.
You will call and the menu doesn't work, or you hear it ringing, but it's not ringing here.
Yeah.
So our phone system is failing. We need to do something.
This is
Everything we have is failing.
This
Even
is
your
also-
mayor is failing. I'm falling apart, okay?
It's also cloud-based.
I'm losing hair by the minute here, okay?
So I can, if I need to change, if we need to go in and change the menu, you go in on the computer and
Software.
change it.
It's all
It's all software.
Oh, awesome.
So I
Reminds
have
me
a
of the
package.
episode of Green Acres.
I put them in the
Climbs the
drive,
pole
but
outside his window.
if you guys want to look at them, it's here.
It's a
So I think what we're going to do is
Anybody wanna see
this will be for discussion for
Yeah, yeah, I'll
the
have
next. Okay. Krista, tell us about H, approval of the extension contract for Trap Rock. Isn't that just?
So it's already a current contract that we have. They just have to extend it because it technically expired.
And this is our contract for the DPW?
Yes.
For stone?
Yes.
Okay, and do we need a resolution?
Yeah,
It's already
in
there.
the packet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll be honest, I didn't even look at the packet. I spent so much time preparing for my Ridge thing. So I apologize that I'm not on
My
top of it
understanding is we
tonight.
got really good pricing, so Jason wanted to continue that pricing
Yes.
by extending the contract.
Okay, so we need a
It's all budget,
resolution?
right?
We have one
We have a
change in
resolution?
motion.
Okay, so can I have,
So moved.
okay, a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We're just waiting for something else.
So I want to make sure I don't have anything on my end.
If anybody
No?
wants to see what we currently
No,
do for
Okay.
Comcast.
Can I have a motion to open to the public?
Budget agenda.
Don't we have a?
I did my
oh, no,
homework.
that's what I'm saying. Never mind. Motion to open the public?
In a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody from the public like to speak? Anybody? Anybody from the? Come on up, Allison.
This is only for stuff that's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
No,
You're limited
I
to
think
10
this is
minutes.
open for you.
Okay.
This is a free-for-all.
Alison Castellano, 9 Procol. Just going back to the Clawson Park fee thing. I just want to say, can we bear in mind that, you know, we're not only talking about the non-profits that rent the pavilion, that are looking to rent the pavilion. Residents may be looking to rent pavilion. And, you know, look, I acted on behalf of my PTO hat on and we rented the pavilion. I have no problem with that whatsoever. It was in our budget to pay for that. That's not a problem. From a resident's point of view, you know, people may not have the facility of their own to have a party for their children and they want to do it at the park. That could be a big nut for them to put out with a $400 check and a $100 check. You know, that could be a lot of money for a resident to lay out to rent the pavilion. So on the back of that, you could end up with people coming. They're not going to pay to rent the pavilion. They're just going to come and use the pavilion. And you're not going to know about it. And they're going to come and they're going to use it. And they're not going to clear up like we're conscious of clearing up when we're paying, you know, to use the pavilion. They could come and leave the trash and mess up with the bathrooms and you know, something you're going to deal with afterwards. And it's not necessarily that they've broken anything that's going to cause you to, you know, have to spend that $400 but, you know, they're going to use it. People are going to come and use it. So I just think bear that in mind when you're making that decision, that I don't necessarily think non-profits will have much of an issue paying the money. Think about the other side of it with the residents who may want to use that and what's affordable to them. What's that balance? You know, what is it really costing the township? What is the township really putting out monetarily to pay for that day to reserve that?
It's over $100.
Pavilion.
Our cost is over 100. We're not recovering our full cost by charging the 100.
We've never used the deposit from per
That-
Pam and Jason.
But that's a different purpose. That's for
But
I'm just saying.
But I understand Allison's point.
That's where you're getting.
You know, if it could be we're cutting off our nose to spite our face here. In other words, it's one thing to say to somebody you have to pay 100. It's another thing to somebody to say you have to walk through the door with a check for 500.
Whether you're getting it back or not at
Right.
the end.
They
People
still have to
just
come up
may
with
not
500.
have or want to put that money out up front. And that's just, you know, if you're just holding the check, okay, if you're holding a piece of paper, you're not going to, I mean, they may be fine with that. But, you know, the people who may be looking to rent the pavilion to have their kids' party or whatever,
Might be scared away.
may not be the people who have the money to put out up
That is the
front.
reason residents don't want to rent it because of the high deposit and.
You think they'd be okay with the 100, the fee? You think the issue is coming in with 500?
Yep.
I could see that. Is there a sign on there that says like?
No, not as far as I know.
But I guess that's the question, right?
Because, like, for instance, like.
Can you take their
back.
credit card and then just only swipe it if they owe?
Yeah, we'll keep a little.
I don't see the problem. You get your money back. If you damage things,
But
then
I'm
you
not,
pay for it.
I'm not gonna come
Isn't
here.
that the way the world works?
Hang on.
You could still cash the check at the end if you were going to hold the check.
No, but
Just
hang
don't
on,
cash it
hang
up
on,
front.
hang on. If we're not having experiences with people damaging things, and we conclude that we have to cash the checks, so now we have to go through that process, which is going to cost us time and in effect money. Maybe the answer is that we don't need the $400 deposit. Maybe the answer is they just come in and pay the $100 fee.
Well, I think we ought to wait for the answer of whether we have to cash them or not. Because
But even
that's
if we don't,
conflating.
even if we don't have to cash it, Tim, these people, what Allison is saying, these people don't have the $400 on top of the 100.
But
But they're not gonna write a check for 400 if it's not in their account.
Right.
Well, but, I mean, it's part of being a responsible person. You know, you use a property, whether it be at the
That's,
beach.
I can go to
whatever.
West Amwell and get it for $50
Well, then go to
as
West
a
Amwell.
donation.
But hang on. Get ready for this one, get your Not everybody's wealthy like you are, Tim.
Oh,
Okay? You know, you gotta understand that. Not everybody lives in the big house and has all the money.
You said you'd pay the fee if people couldn't afford it.
They're tax exempts, not for profits. I could get a charitable donation. Look,
Hey, where else could you go and get a pavilion of that quality and that much land for $100?
no, but it's not the 100, it's the 400 deposit. That's what she's saying.
But, okay, be responsible, you bring 20 kids in there, this makes you watch that they don't damage things.
And that's fine if you're holding their $400 check
That's what we're saying.
and not cashing that check.
Well, we're gonna get that question answered.
But Allison,
500 is very different to 100 for people, for families or those that, you know.
So they're writing a bad check, in other words?
yeah, they might be.
They might do that too, just to get there, you
Do we
know.
have any enforcement mechanism on this payment?
We
We don't have
Stop
enforcement
anybody
mechanism
from-
on
We
anything.
can't stop anybody from using the park.
You can't, exactly. So they're going to go and use
But
anyway.
it's-
And you're not going to know about it.
Well,
Increase
look,
the use on our end.
we're gonna wind up, because actually, one of the things I didn't make it on to this was the vandalism.
It was on the
Okay,
legit.
Oh, it's on the
We're
legit
still
one.
open to the public here, so is there any other issue?
That's
I've got over my 10 minutes. Can I go?
Look,
I'll leave that with you.
I think, let's kick this around and bring it back next month.
So we're gonna get
Because-
the answers to the
Yeah,
questions.
let's kick this around, because you raised a legitimate point. I'm not necessarily adverse to saying we don't take the $400 deposit, and we see how that goes. And if we start experiencing damage, then we go back to the $400 deposit. But I hear you. I understand that for a lot of people, writing that $400 check is hard. And if you have kids, it's even harder, because you have all the expenses associated with having kids. So I got it.
I just don't think you want to make your township's park pavilion unreasonable for your own
Well,
residents.
it's only going to be
That's-
usable by rich people like Tim.
That's right. Yeah.
No, but let's remember, this had to do with a number of people too. We're not saying no one can use the pavilion. They could go there anytime. This was a dedicated use of the pavilion for a quantity of people, if I recall.
Correct.
I forget the number. So
Correct.
you're effectively taking other people away from their right to use the pavilion.
But that has nothing to do with the deposit. The deposit was our security in case they did damage. The $100 was to cover our costs. The deposit was security in case they did damage. Krista is telling me we've never had to draw down on the deposit. Now, I don't disagree with you, Tim, that having that $400 deposit there may cause some people to pay more attention so that our property doesn't get damaged. And so what I would say, and I'm not saying we do this, I'm throwing it out, we should think about it for a month. But one thing to do is to take away the deposit and see. And if we start seeing damage, then we say, okay, the deposit was a discipline, we took it away, we need to bring it back, then we bring it back.
Well, I think we instituted this because we did see damage. People were fouling the restrooms.
Roll back the deposit.
They're still doing that.
Okay.
They're still fouling them, and we don't charge the deposit. The DPW goes in and cleans it. That's part of the reason we went to the $100. Part of the reason we went to the $100 is because the DPW has to go in and clean the restrooms, and that's part of the cost. And when we were doing the analysis, it was something like $40 or $45 an hour, we assumed. And Jason was saying, you know, between the time they have to spend cleaning the restrooms, cleaning up other things, then we had to pay Pam to come, put out the signs, take back the signs. It was costing us at least $100. So the fouling the restrooms, we're already covering that in the 100. What I'm worried about is the real damage. Somebody takes a baseball bat to things, that stuff. And we are having that now, but it's not people who are renting the park. We're having vandalism in the park. And that's why we're going to look into getting cameras for the park, which is something I'm going to bring up as soon as we get bids. Because we already have in Clausen House the technology for the cameras. We have cameras in the East Amwell Museum. So what we want to do is get a couple more, run them out into the park, and feed them off of what we already have. So we don't have to buy all the equipment, just the cameras. Because we're having vandalism in Clausen Park. I'm going to put something on the website to tell residents that if they see suspicious people, call the police, because we've had vandalism in Clausen Park all the way down to the ball fields.
Does their current registration form say that they agree to be responsible for anything?
Yeah, there's some type of clause thing in here.
Did I edit that at one point? I'm trying to remember. I may have edited that form at some point.
If it's a long form,
All right.
So the question is, so my final question though, based
All
on
right.
that is.
I don't think I
No
edited
offense,
that
Rick.
one.
Yeah.
You're just commenting on my getting paid by the hour, right?
Depends on if it's well
It
drafted.
looks
or not.
like it's you.
Based on last year,
I don't, I know I edited.
have we
Looks like
decreased
you
in
are.
registrations at the park?
Increase the registration.
Decreased in people applying to use that
Yes.
pavilion?
From what I'm told, it's decreased, yes.
By a lot or one?
I can get a number.
That's something, I mean, that's just to look at. At the end of the season, how have we decreased the use of people registering or whatever you call it? Registering, I don't know, to use the pavilion or not? If that's the case, they're either put off by the cost or they go in there anyway and not notifying you that they're there.
Let's put this on for next month's agenda. Let's noodle it for a month. Let me talk to Pam, get a little more statistical information. And we should also have signs there that tell people that if you are taking over the pavilion for a party, there is a process you have to follow. Because I don't want some people following our rules, paying the $100, and other people just saying, no, I'm going to ignore it, I'm going to have the party. That's not fair to the people who pay. So let's kick this to next month. In the meantime, continue to charge the $100, and if we change our view on the $100 for not-for-profits, we will refund it.
Takes me a while to get here. Frances Gavigan, not Allison.
And where do you live, Mrs. Gavigan?
I don't know, Mrs. Gavigan's
Oh,
been
Ms.
dead
Gavigan.
for 30 years. I live at 123 Wurtsville Road, accept no invitations. I'm going to really complicate your life. As far as to whether or not you have to cash the checks, you may want to touch base with the county, because I think they got gigged by auditors, and it was part of that whole financial conundrum about 5 or 6 years ago. And there have been people who filed complaints about checks. There's some time clock. Something comes to the county and maybe to the municipality. There's like a 48-hour window that it has to be deposited. And that
Well,
might be
hang on, is that
statutory.
all checks, or is that just your property
don't
checks?
know.
No,
it's everything.
Any cash checks received in the municipality have to be deposited within 48 hours.
Okay, then that may be the answer, then we have to, because I did look into that for the property tax. There are rules that say that we have to deposit the property tax checks within a certain period of time.
Yeah, and I
So
wouldn't
if that
want us
applies
to
to
be
all
getting
checks,
cited for
then-
non-conformance.
Then we have to deposit them. So let's revisit the $400 next month.
Okay.
Kick it down.
Because my inclination is to just drop it and let's see
Or
if we.
lower it.
And let's revisit it. Because we're not going to do our best thinking at 11 o'clock anyway, so.
Well, I'll speak fast. The corollary to that is, I think some of the stuff was years ago, they started having problems up at Round Valley where there would be buses coming in to have sort of everything but a festival going on there. And there is a difference between people who say, ooh, Clausen Park, East Amwell, nice, let's go, and residents of East Amwell, hey, our tax dollars support this park. Let's go. So if you're going to have a $100 fee, then I think there should be a discount for the taxpayers who pay and have supported this multiple ways. And it's not like we have police or sewers or water or cops or anything else. And to encourage the public, residents to use the facilities, even if it's, revenue negative, is a positive social benefit to the community that everybody, no matter what side of the dais they're on, serves.
Francis, you could potentially, I'm going to turn this one over to Chris too, but I think you could potentially bump into constitutional issues when you charge residents less than
I don't know.
non-residents.
I don't know, maybe they can pick up garbage and they can earn credits. I don't know.
Pick up
I'm
dog
just,
poop.
huh?
I think we understand where
We'll
you're
save
coming
on
from.
Yeah, or anything like that. And as far as deposits, you'd have to find out whether or not the deposit could be held or held in an escrow or a general escrow or however the hell you would do it. That's that with the park and the vandalism. What I wanted to tell you is the County Ag Development Board approved with 2 nays, despite Judy Glogal's efforts and my own, to support the bifurcation of the Soshin Farm up on Orchard Road. The side that would be on, they call it the north side, that is half valley and half mountain adjacent to the vineyard. He would sell to the horse and nonprofit lady, but he'd hold the paper, and retain the southern side, which is wholly in the Sourland Mountains and has a building opportunity and lot attached to it. Why I'm not just, other than giving some odd news, is anybody ever heard the name Den Hollander? Up in Franklin Township, there were years of litigation. They're the ones that basically took large chunks of preserve farm and covered everything with greenhouses. They scraped off the soil, they sold it, and then, oh, it's a right to farm, and taxpayer dollars went to preserve that property, like the Soshins is, and we're still supposedly paying that bill off. And I think something that might need to come to the attention, or at least get on the radar, is, this is another thing. If this is animal welfare, I'm late for the finals in basketball.
Francis, can I ask, is there a value on the transaction, the piece that's being carved off and sold to another?
This is permission to subdivide a preserve farm from 150 acre piece into 2 72 and change pieces that are split by Orchard Road.
Right, I got that part, but is then there a transaction and money changing hands?
Yes.
He says there would be, but he's gonna hold the paper.
So.
You
He's
can
splitting
sell
the
a-
farm in 2, Tim, and selling half and keeping it.
But he's selling preserved property.
Correct.
Yes, but the
farm is
easement
preserved.
stays
Personal
put.
gain.
Yeah, but it's a preserved farm. Generally, the SADC and the CADB don't like you splitting preserve farms because they like contiguous acres. It's more efficient for
Right,
farming.
I got it.
But if you're able to demonstrate
Certain forms.
some need,
Fill out
they'll
the-
consider splitting it. So they're taking this big farm and they're splitting it into 2 pieces, and then the owner's selling one piece and keeping the other.
But then why doesn't the money roll back into our?
Because the easement remains, that you can't take those 70-some acres that will be there and put 10 houses on it,
Property's
especially.
all still preserved.
It's
just-
still preserved.
The
Tim. You're just taking a
preservation-
preserved
Oh,
farm
so-
and breaking
so
it
it's
into
The
still-
2 pieces.
easement-
So the market valuation should be
It's
the
still
same.
on
Theoretically,
preserve, yeah.
You need the county and the state approval, and they have to go through some hoops to make that happen.
Yeah,
But
and all of
Francis,
that
the
stuff.
question is, what are you looking for us to do?
To go back because of what happened in Pittstown and in that area with Den Hollander, and folks at the county can explain that to you, to where they took preserved land that everybody supports, and then they find themselves next to commercial row after row after row of greenhouses,
But
go
the
up
enforcement of that is
579.
at the county level and the
But
state
but
level.
Francis, splitting this farm has nothing to do with that.
No,
If
but-
somebody's going to abuse, if somebody's going to come in and put in greenhouses, they're gonna do it whether it's a 150 acre farm or a 70 acre farm.
Actually, in the past, there was discussion that never went anywhere as to whether or not there was a zoning or master plan consideration, especially in areas of special sensitivity like the Sourlands, where there are water constraints. We've got steep slope ordinances. There may be some value in seeing, with Mr. Norman and others, about what would or could be something to think about. Because if people start seeing, it's the same as solar farms aren't farms, and industrial type greenhouses here in the view shed and everything else, I think is going to erode support. How it would be done, the subtleties of it, I just think it's something to have on the radar, especially since places like that drain the Sourlands and then drain into Backbrook and everywhere else. And not long ago, we had discussions about protecting the water quality and things like that. I think that there are mechanisms for proactively protecting preserved property and view sheds that are consistent with land use law and the public support for it.
All right,
The argument that was
I will reach out to
okay.
Bob Hornby and
Yeah.
find out why they felt it was okay to
The
split
argument
this.
that they were making to do it is it said that this is just a very narrow thing, it's just subdividing. It's happening all the time. The argument that was made and bought was, oh, well, you can't get enough farmers, and so, yes, there is a need to be making smaller and smaller farm pieces that are preserved. So the trend, and at least the sentiment that was there, and yeah, I had a tape recorder running, is that the direction that farming has been is no longer viable, and towards more sort of either intensive or other alternative types is a direction that farming will be going in. And, we should be ahead of the curve the way maybe we've been with some other things like solar farms. And that's the head up on that one. It wasn't great news. But anyway, go home, go to bed.
Thank you.
I will do that.
Anybody else? Motion to close?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any questions on the administrative reports?
None? Nope.
Correspondence?
None.
Motion to adjourn?
Bills of the evening.
I'll move the bills of the evening, except
Oh.
for that one that you wanted to hold.
Yeah, with the exception of the,
That one there.
Did you review the bills of the evening?
yeah,
Okay,
Anybody
and you're
say-
okay with them?
yeah, except for that check.
Okay, so motion to approve the bills of the evening?
I did that.
Pete,
I'll
second.
second with Pete's stipulation that we hold that one check. Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night.